Chapter 330. Plop. With a sound, Ji Fei fell into the water. Ji Fei, whose body had deteriorated to the point where he looked like an old man with one foot in the grave, immediately swallowed a few mouthfuls of cold water from the ancient cauldron. He only felt a strong medicinal smell rush to his head, making him want to vomit. He immediately stood up from the water, shocked and angry. He never thought that Yang would throw him into the ancient bronze cauldron. "Let me out!" Ji Fei shouted. His voice reverberated back and forth in the ancient bronze cauldron, making his ears buzz and a feeling of dizziness. He was too weak now. He was afraid that even a child could beat him to the ground. He. "Didn't you say that if I can cure you, you can endure any pain?" Yang proud voice came from outside the ancient cauldron. "What do you mean by this?" Ji Fei quickly calmed down. If she wanted to kill him, there was no need to go through so much trouble. She could just kill him directly. Although he didn't know why Yang locked him in the ancient bronze cauldron, he thought that she didn't have any evil intentions. "Well, it doesn't mean anything. You can soak in this Chaos Dan cauldron for 2 or 3 days. Not everyone has such treatment, haha," Yang said. "Soak for 2 or 3 days?" Ji Fei's face turned green. "That's it. I'm leaving," Yang said. Then, Ji Fei heard Yang footsteps getting farther away. Hey, don't go. "What will I do if you leave? There's nothing to eat here. If I starve for 2 or 3 days, I'll die," Ji Fei hurriedly shouted. In his current condition, he didn't have any qi gathering pills with him. If he soaked in this Chaos Dan cauldron for 2 or 3 days, he might really die. "I won't die. If you're hungry, drink the spiritual liquid in the cauldron." Yang voice came from afar. Ji Fei couldn't help but panic. He shouted repeatedly, but it was quiet outside. There was no sound. Yang seemed to have really left. This crazy girl. Ji Fei couldn't help but curse in a low voice. He looked around and found that the interior of the ancient cauldron was dim. Only a few rays of light shone through the vent holes on the lid of the ancient cauldron. The space inside the ancient cauldron was about 1 zhong in circumference. As Ji Fei stood in the waist-deep water, he realized that the water inside the cauldron was not as simple as ordinary water. Through the light coming in through the vent on the lid of the ancient cauldron, Ji Fei discovered that it was a dark green liquid, in which a large number of plant roots or leaves were floating. Amidst the strong medicinal smell, Ji Fei felt a very strong spiritual energy. Just now, when he was thrown into the ancient cauldron by Yang Ji Fei drank a few mouthfuls of the dark green liquid in a panic. Could this be the spiritual liquid? At this time, Ji Fei felt that his body was gradually becoming hot. He didn't know if it was because he drank a few mouthfuls of the liquid in the cauldron. The skin on his hands gradually became red, as if there was a hot current running around his body. It was the complete opposite of the ghostly aura that was sealed by the 18 soul-subduing nails. Could it be the spiritual herbs in the cauldron? Ji Fei seemed to have thought of something. He then sat cross-legged in the ancient cauldron, only his head was exposed above the dark green liquid. He tried to circulate his Shen Qi, guiding the spiritual herbs in the cauldron to permeate into his body. Ji Fei's Shen Qi was different from ordinary cultivators. His strength came from his body. As long as there was spiritual energy in his body, he could circulate his Shen Qi. As time passed, Ji Fei gradually entered a deep meditative state. The medicinal energy in the surrounding liquid began to seep into Ji Fei's body through the pores of Ji Fei's body. The top of Ji Fei's head gradually emitted steam, and his face gradually turned red. In one of the rooms in the Cauldron Immortal's cave, Yang was sitting on a purple jade chair. In her hand was the storage bag from Ji Fei's body. To be more accurate, it was an unremarkable little black bag. The bag was a little old, but it wasn't sealed by spiritual energy. Even an ordinary person could open it. This guy actually didn't seal the magic treasure bag. He saved me a lot of effort. "I want to see what's inside," Yang said as she opened the bag. The moment the bag was opened, Yang felt a wave of spiritual energy rush towards her. But she immediately frowned. This was because the spiritual energy was mixed with a fiendish aura. This was the aura of devil chi. Yang was very clear. The Cauldron Immortals Cave was not far from the Abyss of Immortals and Demons. Moreover, she often went to the Abyss of Immortals and Demons to pick herbs. The Abyss of Immortals and Demons was close to the Northern Wei Empire. Immortal spiritual energy was extremely chaotic and unstable, making it difficult for cultivators to absorb and use. However, it was still immortal spiritual energy. Places where immortal spiritual energy gathered could often breed rare spiritual herbs and even heavenly treasures. Yang had walked on the ancient stone bridge before, and had seen the surging demonic energy on the other side. What's going on? Yang was a little surprised. However, following that, Yang gaze stopped at a corner of the storage bag. She could no longer move her gaze away. Her face froze for a moment, and then gradually revealed an expression of surprise and joy. Unbelievable, such a thing actually exists in this world. Yang voice trembled. She seemed to be very excited. Then, she reached into Jiu Fei's storage bag and carefully took out 3 stalks of grass. They were not ordinary grass, but immortal grass that was surrounded by 9 colored lights. The immortal grass did not seem to have any color, as if it was transparent. However, there were 9 colored lights flowing on top of it. Longevity grass. It really is the longevity grass. It's exactly as described in the ancient records. 9 colored lights. This is a phenomenon that only occurs when an immortal grass matures. Yang muttered to herself. The Dan Ding sect was a sect that cultivated alchemy. There were countless records of all kinds of spiritual essence in the sect. Yang was the last descendant of the Dan Ding sect. Of course, she knew about the 9-colored longevity grass. If a mortal consumes it, they will live for 200 years. Moreover, they will be immune to all kinds of diseases. If they consume it, they will be able to solidify their soul and extend their lifespan by 200 years. Yang muttered to herself as she looked at the 3 stalks of 9-colored grass in her hands. The reason why she had her current cultivation base was completely due to the help of the medicinal pills. Of course, it was also related to her talent. However, there was a fatal flaw in the cultivation base that relied on medicinal pills. That was that the state of mind could not keep up with the cultivation base. Although Yang was at the peak of the 9th heavenly layer of the transcending mortality realm, her state of mind was not proportional to her cultivation base. The power of the 9th heavenly layer had to be controlled by the state of mind of the 9th heavenly layer. Yang was very clear about her own situation. The reason why she did not dare to take that step was because she was afraid that she would follow in the footsteps of the seniors of the Dan Ding sect. She was afraid that her Dao core would shatter and her soul would dissipate. For cultivators, breaking through from the transcending mortality realm to the ascending void realm was not a guaranteed success. There was no danger involved. In fact, the situation was the exact opposite. The higher the cultivation base, the greater the risk one would have to face when breaking through to the next realm. For cultivators at the peak of the 9th heavenly layer of the transcending mortality realm, if their Dao core was shattered but they could not condense their nascent soul, it meant that they had failed to break through. There was only one outcome for those who failed to break through, and that was death. The terrifying power that erupted from the shattering of the Dao core could not condense a nascent soul. Once that power went out of control, it would destroy the cultivator's physical body and primordial spirit in an instant. Those who were lucky might be able to return to the heavenly Dao and be reincarnated as a human. Those who were unlucky would have their souls scattered and their life imprints completely erased. The longevity grass had another effect, which was to condense the spirit and solidify the soul. It could eliminate the hidden dangers left behind by consuming spiritual pills to increase one's cultivation base. This was what Yang urgently needed now. With the longevity grass, she could try to take that step. I didn't expect that kid to have such a spiritual herb of heaven and earth. Where did he get it from? Yang was shocked and couldn't help but be astonished. The longevity grass was a legendary item. For thousands of years, the cultivators of the Dan Ding sect had walked through the endless mountains and rivers of the Tinglong continent, but they had not even seen the shadow of the longevity grass. One could imagine that it was not easy to obtain this kind of spiritual herb of heaven and earth. It seems like there is a need to find out where this kid came from. Yang thought to herself. However, the longevity grass was in her hands now. It was impossible for her to hand it over. She was already thinking about how to take the longevity grass for herself. Kill Jiu Fei? That doesn't seem possible. I have no enmity with him. How can I kill him for no reason? Yang shook her head. Actually, she had always been cultivating in the Danding cave and rarely went out. She had never killed anyone before. Otherwise, Boss Dongfang, Beitang Yu, and the others who broke into the outer area of the Danding cave would have been torn into pieces by the countless ferocious beasts she controlled. How could they escape so easily? Actually, with Yang Er's cultivation base at the 9th heaven of the transcending mortality realm, it was easy for her to kill Boss Dongfang and the others. Sigh. So annoying. How can I get the longevity grass from that kid legitimately? Yang stood up from the purple jade chair irritably. I got it. After I cure him, this longevity grass will be my reward. Haha. Yang laughed happily. She then carried the 3 9-colored longevity grass and walked into the depths of the cave. The depths of the cave was connected to the underground spiritual vein. It was the place with the densest spiritual energy in the entire Danding cave. The ancestors of the Danding sect had opened up a medicinal herb field there. The real heaven and earth spiritual essence was planted in the medicinal herb field in the depths of the cave. Yang moved the 3 9-color longevity grasses into the medicine field. Spots of spiritual light immediately gathered toward the 9-color longevity grasses. The 9-color glow that lingered around the 9-color longevity grasses became brighter. There's a 9-leaf mysterious ginseng. Alright. This is mine too. Yang took out the 9-leaf mysterious ginseng from Jiu Fei's storage bag and planted it in the medicinal herb field. Mysterious sky vine, Zhuxian fruit, yin-yang lotus. These are all mine, Yang murmured to herself. She kept taking out heaven and earth spiritual essence from Jiu Fei's storage bag and planted them in the medicinal herb field. Chapter 331. Over the past few days, peerless experts had started to appear in the northern region of the Northern Wei Empire. People would occasionally see divine rainbows flying across the sky. There were more and more cultivators in Biling City. There was a rumor circulating among the cultivators that someone had discovered a spirit vein in the northern lands. It was a spirit land that had yet to be developed. This wasn't a baseless rumor. The appearance of peerless experts in the northern lands was a very good proof. Guest Cloud Inn was one of the best inns in the northern mountain city. However, in the northern mountain city where cultivators gathered, this place seemed a bit deserted. This inn had been completely booked by a cultivation family from the east. The cultivators who entered and left the inn were only disciples of this family or cultivators who were on good terms with this family. There was once a cultivator who was dissatisfied with the fact that the people of this clan occupied this inn all by themselves and came to cause trouble. However, he was thrown out of the inn by an old man who looked like an old servant and wore a small green robe. After the old man showed off his skills, no one doubted the strength of this family from the east anymore and no one came to cause trouble. In a courtyard at the back of the inn, the accumulated snow had already been cleared away. There were some cold-resistant plants planted in the courtyard, and they were still green. The courtyard wasn't big, but everything that should be there could be seen here. There was a pavilion in the fake mountain. The pavilion was covered in a thick layer of snow and a few icicles could be seen hanging down from the roof. There was a pond next to the pavilion, but strangely, the water in the pond wasn't frozen in the cold northern lands. One could even see the figures of koi fishes swimming in the water. There were 4 people sitting at the stone table in the pavilion, 3 men and 1 woman. Boss Dongfang, which senior from the Dongfang family came to the northern lands? A middle-aged man with silver hair and a black blade on his back asked. Boss Dongfang wasn't really the boss of the Dongfang family. It was just a title. There were many people in the Dongfang family who were stronger than Boss Dongfang. In terms of strength, Boss Dongfang would be called Boss Dongfang in the Dongfang family. However, it had to be said that Boss Dongfang was an expert with great potential in the Dongfang family. With his cultivation at the 8th sky of the Ascended Realm, Boss Dongfang was highly regarded by the upper echelons of the family. This is not something I can know. Eldest brother Dongfang replied calmly. Even though he was a disciple with great potential, he had yet to truly step into the core of the Dongfang family. Old Black, it seems like your Saber Emperor's bloodline is determined to obtain that spiritual land. Eldest brother Dongfang suddenly looked at the middle-aged man with a profound gaze. Humph. I wonder which bastard leaked the news, causing all the major powers to want a piece of the pie. The middle-aged man whom Boss Dongfang had addressed as Old Black said in a deep voice. His gaze inadvertently swept over the white-clothed woman beside him. Song Wentian, what do you mean by this? Could it be that you suspect that we leaked the news? Song Wentian's gaze didn't escape the white-clothed woman's notice. She immediately glared at Song Wentian and shouted. Did I say you guys? The middle-aged man with the saber on his back, Song Wentian, frowned and said unhappily, although my Saber Emperor's bloodline does not have many people like you, I, Black Saber Song Wentian, am not a pushover. The atmosphere in the pavilion immediately became tense as the two of them confronted each other with equal harshness. All right, both of you should speak less. None of us wish to see such a thing happen. Eldest brother Dongfang said. He was also extremely gloomy. Originally, this was a matter between the three clans. Now, all the major powers of the Tinglong continent had interfered. Song Wentian and Beitang Yu of the Beitang clan seemed to dislike each other. Whenever they were together, they would mock and ridicule each other. There were a few times when the two of them almost started fighting. After hearing eldest brother Dongfang's words, everyone in the pavilion had a bad premonition. For the sake of a spiritual land, all the major powers would be unscrupulous. Fighting was unavoidable. It was currently noon. The weather today was very good. The sun was shining brightly. However, the sunlight didn't seem to be able to dispel the cold that enveloped the northern region. Suddenly, eldest brother Dongfang sensed something and immediately left the pavilion. When he walked out of the courtyard, Beitang Yu and the others couldn't help but feel surprised. However, immediately after, Beitang Yu and Beitang Yi also received a message from their clan. They hurriedly left the inn, leaving only the Saber Emperor's successor, Song Wentian, in the pavilion. They are all a bunch of old and cunning fellows. Song Wentian sneered. Then, he stood up and was about to leave. At this moment, a mysterious figure silently appeared in the pavilion without any warning. Song Wentian almost jumped in fright. His right hand instinctively grabbed the hilt of the saber behind him. When did you become so timid? The person who came said indifferently. The mysterious person who suddenly appeared in front of Song Wentian seemed to be shrouded in a hazy white mist. It gave people the feeling that they were looking at flowers through the mist. When Song Wentian heard this, the fear in his heart immediately disappeared. He calmed himself down and bowed to the person. Disciple Song Wentian greets martial uncle. The person directly sat down beside the stone table and said indifferently, the information you sent back seems to be wrong. I went to take a look, but I didn't find any spiritual land. Although the person Song Wentian called martial uncle spoke in a calm tone, he unintentionally revealed a sharp aura that was like the edge of a blade. It made Song Wentian feel as if a divine weapon was pressed against his throat. How is this possible? Song Wentian was shocked. His voice trembled. This martial uncle was not a kind person. If he misunderstood that Song Wentian had lied to him, the consequences would be dire. When he thought of this, a layer of cold sweat appeared on Song Wentian's forehead. That's not impossible. According to the information you sent back, that place isn't an ownerless land. I'm afraid that someone used their power to hide that spiritual land. That person's tone was still calm, as if he was talking about something insignificant. Just now, Big Brother Dongfang and Beitang Yu left in a hurry. Song Wentian said carefully. Yes. I think those old fellows went to ask them questions. You have to be careful. This is a very special time. Even I don't know how many old fellows have come to the northern lands. If you offend those old fellows, even I won't be able to save you, the mysterious person said. Thank you for the reminder, martial uncle. Song Wentian replied respectfully. The mysterious person did not say anything else. His figure immediately disappeared from the pavilion. Just like when he had first appeared, he had left without a sound. Song Wentian wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. His entire body seemed to collapse as he slumped onto the stone bench. This martial uncle of his was a temperamental person. Every time he saw him, he would have to be extremely careful when dealing with him. Just as the mysterious person left, a blurry figure charged out from another courtyard behind the inn. He stood high up in the sky and looked in all directions with a pair of eyes. I seemed to sense the old saber monster's aura. The person scanned his surroundings but did not find any trace of the mysterious person. He then rushed down to the courtyard below. A faint and illusory figure stood in the sea of clouds in the distance, watching the scene coldly. I didn't think that the old saber monster and Dongfang Lai would also come to Beiling City. The person murmured to himself. Then, his figure disappeared into the sea of clouds. The bitter cold northern lands was no longer peaceful. Beiling City was no longer deserted. At this moment, the entire northern lands was filled with turbulent undercurrents. Many great figures had turned their attention to this place. The Pill Cauldron's paradise was isolated from the rest of the world. Although countless cultivators from the northern lands had entered and there was no lack of peerless experts among them, it was difficult for them to break the peace of the Pill Cauldron's paradise. The forest that Beitang Yu and the others had inadvertently entered seemed to have disappeared from the world. The Dongfang family, the Beitang family, and the Saber Emperor's bloodline had sent many experts into the depths of the snow forest. However, they could no longer find the forest that was filled with roaring beasts. Some people began to doubt the reliability of the spiritual land. However, the people from the Dongfang family and the Beitang family knew that the spiritual land definitely existed. Eldest brother Dongfang, Beitang Yu, and the others would never dare to lie to the higher-ups of their families. The more they could not find the spiritual land, the more shocked the experts from the three families became. The spiritual land had an owner. It was obvious that someone with great power had hidden the spiritual land. Forcefully concealing an entire spiritual land, this sort of method was too terrifying. No one knew that the person who had hidden the spiritual land was not an expert with great power as the experts from the Beitang family and the Dongfang family had imagined. There was a terrifying formation guarding the periphery of the Pill Cauldron paradise. Even a demigod would not be able to break through the formation. If the owner did not activate the formation, no one could enter the Pill Cauldron paradise. Ji Yufei, eldest brother Dongfang, and the others who had been chasing him could be said to be very lucky. The successor of the Pill Cauldron school, Yang had only stopped the operation of the formation for fun. That was why they could enter the periphery of the Pill Cauldron paradise. When Yang activated the formation again, no one could find the Pill Cauldron paradise. Even if eldest brother Dongfang and the others had left marks along the way, it was still useless. The scenery of the Pill Cauldron paradise was picturesque. It was like a paradise. However, not every place in the Pill Cauldron paradise had such a relaxing and joyful scene. In a corner of the Pill Cauldron paradise, there was a small barren valley. Within the valley, there was nothing but rocks that were not covered by vegetation. In the depths of the valley, there was a high platform made of white jade. In the sky, there were mysterious runes engraved on it. An ancient bronze cauldron stood on the white jade platform. At this time, the top of the ancient bronze cauldron on the high platform was emitting wisps of hot air. It seemed that something was being refined in the cauldron. However, there was no flame under the cauldron. The hot air seemed to be coming from the ancient bronze cauldron. Chapter 332. Time passed by, and the valley was very quiet. There was no sound. Deep in the valley, on the white jade platform, an ancient bronze cauldron was gradually covered by a layer of hazy light. A strong spiritual fluctuation came out of the ancient cauldron, and a fiery aura spread out on the white jade platform. The surrounding temperature was gradually rising. The ancient bronze cauldron on the white jade platform, although it was also a rare treasure, it was not a treasure that had a spirit, and could not automatically refine elixirs. The reason why the ancient cauldron was abnormal was because of the person trapped in it. That person was Ji Yufei, who was thrown into the ancient bronze cauldron by Yang. Unknowingly, Ji Fei had already spent 2 days and 2 nights in the ancient bronze cauldron. During this time, Ji Fei was always in a deep state of meditation, and the mysterious arts in his body were constantly running. His body was like a bottomless pit, greedily absorbing the huge amount of spiritual energy contained in the spiritual liquid in the cauldron. His consciousness was in a state of half awake and half dreaming. He could only vaguely sense what was happening in the outside world. This kind of feeling was very unreal, as if he was in the clouds and fog, and could not be accurate. The spiritual energy in the ancient bronze cauldron was rising, and the rays of light were circling around Ji Fei's body. The ancient martial arts cultivation method was indeed extraordinary. Even if his body was extremely weak, Ji Fei could still use a little essence in his body to guide the spiritual energy in the cauldron into his body to expel the yin and ghost qi in his body. For 2 days, he used the spiritual energy in the cauldron to nourish his weak body and gradually wear down the yin and ghost qi in his body. This method seemed to be effective, and he succeeded in expelling a small part of the mysterious yin and ghost qi. Ji Fei found that although this method was effective, the speed of expelling the yin and ghost qi was extremely slow. At this current speed, it would probably take more than 100 years to completely expel the yin and ghost qi in his body. In the ancient bronze cauldron, the spiritual liquid concocted by Yang was full of spiritual qi. Moreover, most of the spiritual herbs dissolved in the spiritual liquid were extremely dry and hot. They gathered together to form a strong yang qi, which happened to restrain the Shenyin ghost qi in Ji Fei's body. On the morning of the 3rd day, Ji Fei showed no sign of stopping inside the bronze cauldron. The spiritual waves from the cauldron seemed to be even stronger than before. On the white jade platform, there was a blazing aura. At this time, a wave of magic power suddenly came from the entrance of the valley. Someone was opening the seal at the entrance of the valley. Then, a purple figure walked in from outside the valley as if he had passed through a transparent water curtain. That violet-colored figure moved gracefully like a fleeting shadow, nimble like an immortal that had descended to the mortal world, and she approached gracefully like a celestial maiden that had walked out from a painting. There were all sorts of restrictions set up in the valley. If one wasn't someone from the Pill Cauldron School, it would be impossible for them to enter. The person who had just entered was the only successor of the Pill Cauldron School, Yang. Once she entered the valley, she walked straight into the depths of the valley. As she approached the white jade platform, she suddenly paused and a strange expression appeared on her face. She had sensed something strange on the platform. Yang beautiful face revealed a hint of astonishment as she walked onto the white jade platform. She stared at the steaming ancient bronze cauldron and mumbled to herself, "I didn't expect him to have such a trick up his sleeve. His body is like rotten wood, but he can still attract spiritual qi into his body. Hihi, that's good too. It saves me a lot of effort." As Yang spoke, she sat down cross-legged in front of the ancient bronze cauldron and began to form a spell with her hands. Waves of magic power rippled out from Yang hands. Then, Yang sent rays of light condensed from her magic power towards the ancient bronze cauldron in front of her. The magical light entered the body of the cauldron. Then, the mysterious runes on the ancient bronze cauldron began to light up. Yang seemed to be activating the ancient bronze cauldron. As the rays of light condensed from magic power entered the body of the cauldron, an immeasurably ancient aura began to emit from the ancient cauldron. The surface of the ancient cauldron was covered with runes which formed into countless magic formations that were branded onto the cauldron's body. This magic formation was neither an offensive nor a defensive magic formation. It was a magic formation used for alchemy. Yang was activating the alchemy magic formation on the ancient cauldron and releasing the power of alchemy fire. The ancient bronze cauldron began to emit waves of powerful energy. The runes on the cauldron's body began to appear and the spiritual qi around the white jade platform began to gather towards the ancient bronze cauldron. The alchemy magic formation began to gather the surrounding spiritual qi of heaven and earth and turned it into alchemy fire. Wisps of fire energy began to emerge from the cauldron's body like tiny fire snakes swimming around the cauldron's body. The alchemy magic formation did not release the alchemy fire outwards. Instead, it burned towards the inside of the cauldron. Rumble. The ancient bronze cauldron began to vibrate. Then, it left the ground and floated above the white jade platform. Slowly, it began to rotate. Yang who was sitting cross-legged on the white jade platform, had a grave expression on her face. She stared at the ancient bronze cauldron in the sky and shot out rays of light. As more and more magic formations were activated, the entire ancient bronze cauldron began to flow with fiery red fire energy. It was not an ordinary fire. Instead, it was the alchemy magic formation on the ancient bronze cauldron. It condensed the spiritual chi of heaven and earth and transformed it into alchemy fire. It was the Taoist true fire. This small mountain valley was actually where the Pill Cauldron School concocted pills. The reason why it was completely barren, without any plants, was because the people of the Pill Cauldron School concocted pills here. The heat released by the people of the Pill Cauldron School had turned this place into a wasteland. As the alchemy magic formation on the body of the ancient bronze cauldron was gradually activated, wisps of fire energy began to seep into the cauldron from the outside. The dark green spiritual liquid in the cauldron began to be evaporated by the fire energy and turned into spiritual mist. As more and more alchemy magic formations were activated, the temperature in the ancient bronze cauldron began to rise rapidly. Ji Yufei, who was in a deep meditative state, seemed to feel something strange around him. What's going on? Very quickly, Ji Yufei woke up from his meditative state. All he saw was a blurry mist in front of him. Waves of heat surged from all directions, making him feel like he was in a furnace. In reality, he really was in a furnace. Yang what are you doing? Ji Yufei shouted. He felt that something was wrong. The surrounding temperature was still rising rapidly. The high temperature in the cauldron made him feel pain all over his body. His skin felt like it was about to split open. Outside the ancient bronze cauldron, Yang did not answer. In reality, at this moment, she could not speak at all. Yang entire body was filled with spiritual energy. Her movements of summoning spiritual energy became slower and slower. She even felt a wave of exhaustion. She really wanted to stop. However, she could not stop. This was a critical moment. If she stopped, all her previous efforts would be wasted and she would have to start all over again. I still need 10 more alchemy magic formations. Yang clenched her teeth and continued to summon spiritual energy. At this moment, she was sweating profusely. Beads of sweat the size of soybeans rolled down her face and dripped onto the ground. Although she was activating the simplest alchemy fire magic formation on the ancient bronze cauldron, it was still extremely taxing. What? Ji Yufei's scream came from within the cauldron. He felt as if he had jumped into a volcano. His entire body felt like it was surrounded by magma. The spiritual liquid in the cauldron was boiling. It constantly evaporated due to the high temperature and turned into a spiritual mist. What was terrifying was that the temperature of the spiritual mist seemed to be even more terrifying than the heat that was surging in from all directions. The ancient bronze cauldron emitted an unfathomable force that bound the spiritual mist that was evaporated from the spiritual liquid inside the ancient cauldron. It just happened to envelop Ji Yufei. An unfathomable force seemed to be pressing down on Ji Yufei. The spiritual mist outside his body drilled into his pores through his body. The spiritual mist formed by the alchemy fire contained pure spiritual energy. However, at the same time, it also contained a terrifying heat. Ji Yufei felt as if traces of magma had drilled into his body. From top to bottom, his meridians, his flesh, and even his bones, there were countless fire snakes slithering about. His entire body, from the inside out, was being mercilessly burned. The terrifying pain stimulated Ji Yufei's sensitive nerves, causing him to scream and almost have a mental breakdown. Ah, so painful. Stop right now. Ji Yufei screamed. Even though his mind was as firm as iron, he could not endure the pain in his body. Good. It's finally done. Yang used the last spiritual technique and shot out the last ray of spiritual light condensed from her spiritual energy. She activated the last alchemy array. Bang! The entire ancient bronze cauldron was immediately covered in a ball of fire. The alchemy array began to operate. Spiritual energy from all directions converged and turned into raging flames. The entire cauldron turned into a huge fireball in the blink of an eye. When Yang heard the inhuman screams coming from the ancient bronze cauldron, she could not help but frown. She thought to herself, didn't this guy say that he could endure any pain? Yang sat paralyzed on the ground and took out a jade bottle from her body. She poured out a medicinal pill and swallowed it. Very soon, her pale complexion, which was slightly pale due to the large amount of magic power she had consumed, began to turn rosy. Hihi, you can enjoy yourself in there. I will come back in 3 days. If you are still alive by then, you will have a chance to recover. As she spoke, Yang stood up from the ground and walked down the white jade platform. Poor Jiu Fei. He was refined by Yang like a spiritual medicine for alchemy. What was more frightening was that the ancient bronze cauldron produced a great force that bound him to the center of the ancient cauldron. Jiu Fei, who was wrapped in layers of spiritual fog, could not die even if he wanted to. It was as if he was being roasted on a fire. He was enduring an inhuman pain that was 100 times worse than death by 1,000 cuts. Inside the ancient bronze cauldron, the spiritual mist surged violently. The spiritual mist constantly seeped into Jiu Fei's body through his pores. Jiu Fei only felt that his entire body, inside and out, was burning with raging flames. He could even smell the smell of burning. Ah, 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 he screamed until he was hoarse. In the end, he could no longer scream. His throat could only make a few sounds of ah, ah, The endless pain he was enduring was not without its benefits. More than half of the ghostly aura that was sealed by the 18 soul-suppressing nails in his body had been dispelled. Using this extreme method to dispel the ghostly aura in his body, although it caused Jiu Fei to suffer unprecedented pain, it seemed to be very effective. It was many times faster than the speed at which he dispelled the ghostly aura himself. The ghostly aura in his flesh and blood was gradually dispelled. However, the ghostly aura entwined in his bone marrow showed no signs of dissipating. However, Jiu Fei's body clearly changed. Chapter 333. As night fell, Beiling City was still bustling with activity. Cultivators from all over the world gathered in Beiling City. Some of them came for a reason, while others came just to watch the fun. In short, all the cultivators that rushed into Beiling City had various reasons. In the north, other than the snow forest, there were also endless snow-capped mountains. There were no lack of terrifying beasts living in the mountains. It was not a good place to be. Even transcending mortality realm cultivators did not dare to walk into the depths of the snow-capped mountains alone in the dark. On this night with a bright moon and few stars, under the moonlight, 3 figures quickly walked on the thick snow. They did not even leave any footprints wherever they went. In the eyes of ordinary people, this was the legendary lightness technique of stepping on snow without a trace. The cold wind whistled, blowing off the snow on the trees from time to time. From time to time, there were mournful roars of beasts coming from the depths of the snow-capped mountains. These 3 uninvited guests passed through the snow forest and crossed the snow-capped mountains. They lowered their heads and hurried on their way. They seemed to be heading somewhere, not aimlessly. After walking for 100 miles, the 3 stopped at the foot of a mountain. The bone-chilling wind could not reach here. A young man in a white robe with a simple long saber on his waist took out a map and looked at it. The long saber on the young man's waist was covered with runes and a faint cold and fierce aura was emitted from it. This saber seemed to be extraordinary. Hey, Dongfang Long, how far are we from the 9 underworld spring? A handsome young man in a black robe said to the young man who was looking at the map. Beitang Ao, be polite. Another young man in a white robe looked at the young man in a black robe and said unhappily. Beitang Ao looked at the young man in a white robe with disdain and said coldly, if it was in the past, I could be polite to you brothers, but now, It turned out that these 3 young men were Dongfang Chen, Dongfang Long and Beitang Ao of the Beitang clan. Although Dongfang Chen was very unhappy that Beitang Ao put on an arrogant attitude in front of them, he was also a little helpless. After all, Beitang Ao's strength was higher than his and he had the right to be arrogant. In the world of cultivation, strength was everything. If you wanted to gain the respect of others, you needed to have great strength. In these few years, Beitang Ao's cultivation had already broken through to the transcending mortality realm, while Dongfang Chen's cultivation stagnated in the awakening 9 heavens because of Ji Yufei. The halo of a genius had long been lost. Others had long broken through, but he himself was blocked at the door of the transcending mortality realm. This made Dongfang Chen feel depressed every time he thought about it. Beitang Ao, if you have the guts, then go and act crazy in front of Ji Yufei. Dongfang Long put away the map and said disapprovingly. Upon hearing what was said, a hint of displeasure flashed through Beitang Ao's face. He said coldly, "Who said that one arrow is enough to kill Ji Yufei, making this father come to this desolate place in the middle of the night?" After Dongfang brothers heard Beitang Ao's words, they became somewhat angry. "Don't we want to kill Ji Yufei? If Ji Yufei doesn't die, what does it mean for our two families, don't you know?" Dongfang Chen said angrily. Okay, I don't want to quarrel with you. How far is it from here to the 9th nether spring? Beitang Ao waved his hand. Dongfang Chen and Dongfang Long looked at each other. They both knew that the matter at hand was more important. They still had to borrow the power of the Beitang family. It was not wise to fall out with Beitang Ao at this time. After crossing the 2 snow-capped mountains in front, we can reach the land of extreme yin. Dongfang Long said. Then what are you waiting for? Let's go. Beitang Ao said coldly. The relationship between Beitang Ao and Dongfang brothers didn't seem to be very good, but both sides didn't want to make things too stiff. So, the three walked out of the col and continued to the depths of the snow-capped mountains. Dongfang brothers and Beitang Ao were all cultivators, so they were not afraid of the cold. They walked on the thick snow as if they were flying. Soon, they crossed the 2 snow-capped mountains in front of them and came to a snow valley. They stopped. They all felt a trace of uneasiness at the same time. The entire valley was shrouded in strands of black qi, and the grayish-black underworld mist floated in the air. The valley emitted an eerie and terrifying aura that caused one's heart to palpitate, as if there was a peerless demon hiding in the valley. The 9th nether spring is in the depths of the valley, Dongfang Long said, but he didn't move his feet. He seemed unwilling to step into the valley, at least he didn't want to be the first to enter this evil place. The 9th nether spring was definitely not a good place. Here, yin energy gathered. Just by standing outside the valley, one could feel the cold air penetrating into their body. If we don't get the water of extreme yin from the 9th nether spring, we can't extinguish the flame of the primordial spirit lamp. Dongfang Chen muttered to himself. No one knew who he was talking to. The 9th nether spring was a secret place in the north. Here, yin energy gathered. It was a yin cave. 4 devil cultivators or ghost cultivators, it was a treasure land. Cultivating in the yin cave would yield twice the result with half the effort. The 3 of them knew that the valley in front of them was very evil. No one was sure if there were devil cultivators or ghost cultivators cultivating in the valley. Therefore, the Dongfang brothers and Beitang Ao hesitated. They didn't want to be the first to step into the valley. Under the moonlight, in the evil valley where yin qi gathered, the surroundings were very quiet. There was not a single sound, not even the sound of the wind could be heard. This kind of absolute silence made people feel incomparably oppressed, as if there was a huge rock pressing down on their chests. Should we go in or not? Dongfang Long said softly. His breathing was a bit rapid, he couldn't calm down. If they couldn't get the water of the 9th nether spring in the valley, they couldn't extinguish the flame of the primordial spirit lamp. Dan Chengzi brought Ji Yufei's primordial spirit lamp down the mountain. With the lamp as a guide, he found the northern devil domain. As long as Ji Yufei didn't die, the lamp wouldn't extinguish. Because of this, Dongfang Chen knew from Dan Chengzi that Ji Yufei wasn't dead, because although the flame of the primordial spirit lamp was very weak, it had never been extinguished. Dan Chengzi was still trying to find Ji Yufei. If he found him, Dongfang Chen's secret would be exposed. The crime of murdering a fellow disciple was not small. What Dongfang Chen had done had already violated the rules of the sect and violated the great taboo of the Supreme Mystery Sect. If it was light, he would be crippled of his cultivation base and expelled from the sect. If it was heavy, he would be executed. He would also shame the Dongfang family. This kind of thing must not happen. The water of the 9th nether spring was the place where the yin cave was located. It was the place where the yin energy was the densest. The water of extreme yin was the only thing that could extinguish the flame of the primordial spirit lamp. The purpose of Dongfang Chen and the others was very simple. That was to obtain the water of extreme yin, and then secretly extinguish the primordial spirit lamp in Dan Chengzi's hands. They would let Dan Chengzi think that Ji Yufei was dead. Once the primordial spirit lamp was extinguished, Dan Chengzi might give up looking for Ji Yufei. During this period of time, he would find Ji Yufei and then kill him. Everything would be solved. Since we're here, we can't go back empty-handed, Dongfang Chen said in a deep voice. His eyes suddenly became fierce and firm. He stepped forward and was about to step into the valley filled with yin energy. If you don't want to die, leave quickly. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly came from behind Dongfang Chen and the others. The Dongfang brothers and Beitang Ao were shocked. Shua. Turning around, Zhongxian saw a green-robed figure slowly walking over from the snowy ground 100 zhong behind him. That person only took 2 or 3 steps to cross a distance of 1,000 feet and arrive before them. He seemed to be very calm and the person didn't seem to be moving very fast on the snowy ground, but he had truly arrived before the 3 of them. Shrinking the earth into an inch. Dongfang Chen's pupils couldn't help but shrink. He could already see that this was just a shallow Dao technique, but when this person used it, there was such a scene. It was really shocking. Beitang Ao and Dongfang Long couldn't help but be moved. Dongfang Long's right hand was already holding the hilt of the sword on his waist. If the person acted strangely, he would not hesitate to draw the sword. This cyan-clothed person was wearing a purple Dao crown and a cyan Dao robe. His sleeves were fluttering in the wind. His face was thin, and his whole person exuded an otherworldly aura. The person's eyes were very deep. He swept over the 3 people as if he could see the depths of their hearts. The 3 of them all had a strange feeling of being seen through. Disciples of the Taishen sect, descendants of the Saber Emperor, Beitang Ao. The cyan-clothed Daoist slowly said, but it was the origin of the Dongfang brothers and Beitang Ao. Why are you here? Seeing that the person who came must be a senior in the Dao sect, the Dongfang brothers and Beitang Ao breathed a sigh of relief when they saw this. Dongfang Chen stepped forward and bowed to the cyan-clothed Daoist. Greetings, senior. We are here on the orders of the sect to come and collect the water of extreme yin. Water of extreme yin? Strange, what do the people of the Taishen sect want that thing for? The cyan-clothed Daoist thought for a moment and then said, you should leave quickly. Senior, is there any danger in this valley? Beitang Ao said. In front of this cyan-clothed Daoist, he did not dare to show any arrogance. The cyan-clothed Daoist was about to speak. Roar. At this moment, there was an earth-shattering roar in the valley without warning. The sound shook the heavens and the earth, and the entire valley shook. Dongfang Chen's cultivation was the lowest. When the sound came, it was as if he was struck by lightning. His body shook violently, and he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression suddenly became weary. Dongfang Long and Beitang Ao had the cultivation of the transcending mortality realm, but they also felt their blood boiling. Their faces became pale in an instant, and their bodies were on the verge of collapse. Rumble. A huge roar spread out in all directions, and there was a strange sound like 10,000 horses galloping nearby. The nearby snow-capped peaks were avalanches. Good heavens! The cyan-clothed Daoist no longer paid attention to Dongfang Chen and the others. He took a step forward and rushed into the valley like a bolt of lightning. Chapter 334. An earth-shattering roar caused the entire valley to boil. The yin energy surged violently. A terrifying fluctuation that was like a mountain that made people have the urge to look up at it spread out from the valley. Network, outside the valley, the Dongfang brothers and Beitang Ao immediately turned pale with fright. Beitang Ao was the first to retreat, while Dongfang Long picked up Dongfang Chen, who was on the verge of collapsing, and retreated as well. They had no choice but to retreat. Just like what the azure-robed Daoist said, if they didn't want to die, they had to leave. Inside the valley, There really was an unimaginable existence lurking. Just a roar was enough to make the three of them suffer a great impact. It was easy to imagine how powerful the existence inside the valley was. Boom! Another loud sound came from behind them. A terrifying energy fluctuation, like a monstrous wave, swept out from the valley, and the ground shook violently. Beitang Ao and the others who were running for their lives felt as if they were standing on a violent wave. They almost fell to the ground. It was too terrifying. This was definitely a sound that could only be caused by a peerless cultivator. Peerless cultivators were fighting inside the valley where yin energy gathered. After running for dozens of miles, Beitang Ao and Dongfang Long finally stopped. They climbed up a mountain and gazed at the valley from afar. A battle between peerless cultivators was definitely a rare sight. They didn't want to miss it. Waves of muffled noises kept bursting out from the valley. Rays of strong light broke through the layers of yin energy and rushed out from the valley, illuminating the entire world. Vaguely, there seemed to be countless talismans surging inside the valley, constantly dispersing the surging yin energy and emitting an extremely powerful energy fluctuation. A huge demonic shadow loomed inside the valley, emitting an unparalleled ferocious aura. It constantly bombarded the countless talismans that emitted endless rays of light. The talismans drew in the energy of heaven and earth and unleashed an unimaginably powerful force, constantly bombarding the demonic shadow. That person is a powerful cultivator from the Shongqing sect. Dongfang Chen exclaimed. Dongfang Long had already put him down. The front of his shirt was stained with blood. The ferocious demon in the valley roared angrily, and the terrifying sound wave directly injured Dongfang Chen. In front of a peerless expert, the Dongfang brothers and Beitang Ao were as weak as ants. After all, Dongfang Chen was a disciple of the Taishen sect, and the Taishen sect was one of the three great Taoist sects. With his knowledge, of course, he recognized that the Taoist in blue who rushed into the valley was using the talisman technique of the Shongqing sect. At this time, a terrifying fluctuation of spiritual power erupted in the valley. Then, Dongfang Chen and the others saw a soul-stirring scene. In the sky above the valley, rays of golden light danced in the air like countless golden snakes. Then, they formed into a giant talisman that covered the entire valley. With enough energy to destroy the heaven and earth, the talisman slammed down. Rumble. It was as if countless thunderbolts were roaring above the 9 heavens. The incomparably huge golden talisman attracted the spiritual energy of the world. The moment the golden talisman was formed, the endless spiritual energy quickly gathered towards the golden talisman that shrouded the sky above the valley. The golden light illuminated the surroundings, covering the snowy region in a layer of gold. The gigantic golden talisman that enveloped the heavens and the earth sealed the entire valley. The endless yin qi that surged out from the valley was also suppressed. Roar. Inside the valley, there was an earth-shattering roar. The ferocious demon was roaring. The moment the golden talisman shrouded the giant demon, it instantly exploded. The first son of the Demon King is only SOSO. The vast voice spread throughout the sky and the earth. The Taoist in blue stood on top of the golden talisman and used all his strength to activate the golden talisman. The endless yin qi was dispersed by the golden light emitted by the golden talisman. The Taoist in blue seemed to have the absolute upper hand. It turned out that he was making a move against Chu Ji. Chu Ji, who had caused a ruckus at Beeling Pass and slaughtered all the guards at the pass, had escaped here. It seemed that Chu Ji had awakened from his state of madness. Otherwise, he would not have found this yin cave and wanted to use the mysterious yin qi to heal himself. Network, damn it. The yin qi in the valley surged violently and Chu Ji's crazed roar could be heard. That day, he had fought against 2 opponents, Dan Chengzi and the peerless expert in Beeling City. In the end, he was defeated and had to escape with injuries. That day on the ancient stone bridge in the abyss of immortals and demons, Dan Chengzi had stabbed him between the eyebrows. His mudpill palace, which he had painstakingly repaired, had been destroyed and he had lost his mind. Chu Ji's demonic body, which had been modified by the blood of the gods and demons, had the ability to automatically recover. It was no weaker than Ji Yu Fei's 5 elements martial body. After the battle with Dan Chungzi and the peerless expert, he had escaped to the snowy region. Chu Ji's Mudpill Palace had gradually been repaired and he had regained his sanity. The golden talisman shrouded the area and the entire valley shook violently. Boulders rolled down the mountain continuously. The endless heaven and earth spiritual chi in the surrounding area rapidly gathered and turned into rays of golden light that swam around the talisman. The golden talisman formed by the endless spiritual chi showed signs of becoming solid. The yin chi in the yin cave was gradually being pushed away. The Taoist in blue wanted to suppress this place where the yin chi gathered by himself. Bang! At this moment, a ray of blood-red light that exuded an endless evil aura broke through the layers of yin chi. With an unstoppable momentum, it struck the golden talisman fiercely. The golden talisman that enveloped the area immediately shook violently. The golden light that was emitting from the talisman dimmed. The sky demon blade. It is indeed extraordinary. The Taoist in blue from the Shangqing sect stepped on the talisman and continued to descend. He did not believe that the talisman, which had gathered the endless heaven and earth spiritual chi, could not withstand the sky demon blade. Using the talisman to draw the power of heaven and earth to form a terrifying attack was the specialty of the Shangqing sect. The Taoist in blue's cultivation was extremely powerful. The golden talisman had actually successfully blocked the sky demon blade's attack. Die! Chu Ji roared angrily in the dark clouds. Suddenly, the yin chi in the valley retreated like the tide. A blood-red demonic blade emitted a blinding blood-red light that had never been seen before. The demonic blade was devouring the endless dark clouds and demonic chi. Break! Chu Ji shouted. The surging demonic chi gathered to form a demonic shadow that was hundreds of feet tall. The demonic shadow held the blood-red demonic blade and slashed upwards with all its might. Swoosh! The blood-red light from the blade shot up to thousands of feet, exuding an endless amount of evil aura. Like a terrifying blood-red ray of light, it seemed to split the void and shatter the heavens and earth. In an instant, it struck the golden talisman that was enveloping the valley. Boom! With a loud bang, golden rays of light shot out and the sky was dyed red. The blood-red light from the blade cut through the golden talisman that was enveloping the valley and struck out from the valley. The 1,000-foot-long blade of light shot straight up into the sky. This slash had gathered an endless amount of dark clouds and devil chi, pushing the terrifying might of the sky demon saber to an unimaginable level. Even the golden talisman that had gathered an endless amount of heaven and earth spiritual chi was cut by this slash. The golden talisman that was cut did not collapse. Instead, it quickly shrank and entered the body of the Taoist in blue. The Taoist in blue suffered a great impact and spat out a mouthful of blood. Swoosh! Without any hesitation, the Taoist in blue turned into a golden ray of light and rushed out of the valley. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared under the night sky. After witnessing the earth-shattering battle between the peerless masters, Dongfang Chen and the others couldn't speak for a long time. It wasn't until the horrifying energy fluctuation in the world gradually calmed down that they recovered from the shock. This, Dongfang Chen and the others knew that the green-robed Daoist from the Shangqing sect was defeated and the Nine Nether Spring was occupied by the terrifying demon in the valley. The demon was probably hiding in the spring and using the yin chi to cultivate. What should we do? Beitang Ao looked at Dongfang Chen and asked. Dongfang Chen stared at the valley that was surrounded by yin chi. After a while, he said, "What else can we do? We came here for nothing." They knew very well that unless the peerless masters from their clans came, they might be able to obtain the water of extreme yin. However, they could not invite the peerless masters from their clans. To be able to invite Boss Dongfang, Beitang Yu, and the other outstanding descendants of the two clans was already the limit of the power they could use. Just as Dongfang Chen and the others were about to retreat, they suddenly felt a light purple figure silently appear outside the entrance of the valley in front of them. Demon race! Chu Ji's voice came from the valley. Dongfang Chen and the others stopped in their tracks. They were very surprised. Another peerless master appeared. It seemed that many people were rushing towards the demon in the valley. One should know that peerless masters of the royal void realm were rarely seen. However, tonight, near the valley where yin chi gathered, 3 peerless masters appeared one after another. Although the mountain where Dongfang Chen and the others were at was very far away, after all, the vision of a cultivator was extraordinary. They could still see the figure clearly. It was a young girl wearing a light purple dress. If this girl didn't have a pair of furry ears, she would simply be a human. Not only was this girl not human, but she was also a demon who could already transform. Demons who could transform were very terrifying. Not only did they have human-like intelligence, but they also had tyrannical strength. Hee. The heavenly devil blade is indeed worthy of being called the #1 devil blade of the devil path. Chu Ji, your name is like thunder piercing the ears these days, the maid-like girl said with a smile. Who are you? I know a lot of demons who can transform, but you are definitely not one of them. Chu Ji's voice was very cold, so cold that it was suffocating. The people who came here were either friends or enemies. He, Chu Ji, had no possibility of becoming friends with a demon, let alone a demon. I want to fight with you, but... The girl was a little hesitant. She didn't have any intention of making a move. Are you afraid of an unfair victory? Chu Ji seemed to know the girl's concerns. A true expert, and a confident expert, often disdained to make a move when the other party was seriously injured. This was because they had absolute confidence in their own strength. Chapter 335. The battle between demons and monsters that Dongfang Chen and others were looking forward to did not happen. The demon girl outside the valley did not attack Chu Ji, but retreated in the end. Perhaps, the demon girl really thought that if she fought with Chu Ji at this time, even if she won, it would be an unfair victory, so she retreated. Although they were demons and monsters, they were not life and death enemies. On the distant snowy peak, the Dongfang brothers and Beitang Ao knew that their trip tonight was in vain. The demon in the valley ahead was incomparably powerful. It was not something they could imagine. Let's go, Beitang Ao said, and then turned to walk down the snowy peak. At this moment, Dongfang Chen suddenly said, wait a minute. What, do you still want to get the extreme yin water at this time? Don't dream. Beitang Ao glanced at Dongfang Chen disdainfully and said coldly. This is not impossible. Dongfang Chen said indifferently. Second brother, don't take the risk. The demon in the valley, even if the peerless experts of the family come, they may not be able to drive him away. If we go to get the extreme yin water at this time, it is tantamount to throwing away our lives. Dongfang Long said with a frown. Big brother, will I be a fool who will throw away my life knowing that there is danger? Dongfang Chen said calmly. When Beitang Ao and Dongfang Long saw that Dongfang Chen did not seem to be joking, they couldn't help but be curious. Does he really have a way to get the extreme yin water? Wait. If my guess is right, the demon in the valley is about to leave. Dongfang Chen seemed to have a card up his sleeve, but only he himself knew that in fact, he did not have much confidence. Hehe, okay, I will wait and see. Beitang Ao had already walked more than a dozen steps. After hearing Dongfang Chen's words, he laughed and walked back. He wanted to see Ji Yufei suffer. However, at this time, Dongfang Long and Beitang Ao seemed to have vaguely thought of something. It seemed that what Dongfang Chen said was not impossible. It had to be said that Dongfang Chen's words were really accurate. After the demon girl outside the valley left, soon, a mass of demon chi rushed out of the valley, and a heart-palpitating and terrifying aura immediately spread. The mass of demon chi, like a demon cloud, rushed out of the valley and quickly flew towards the north. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared under the night sky. This. Beitang Ao and Dongfang Long couldn't help glancing at each other. They couldn't believe that the devil path expert in the valley really left. Second brother, how did you know that the demon in the valley would leave? Dongfang Long asked in shock. Dongfang Chen smiled and said, actually, it's nothing. I just found out the identity of the demonic cultivator in the valley. Yes. According to the azure-clothed daoist who was defeated just now, that person seems to be called Chu Ji. Dongfang Long recalled the conversation between the azure-clothed daoist and the fiendish Dao expert in the valley. Chu Ji, the first son of the devil monarch. I should have thought of it long ago. Really. When Beitang Ao heard this, he immediately came to a realization. The demon in the valley was the madman who had rushed out of the extreme North Devil region and destroyed the northern mountain pass. The northern region of the Northern Wei Empire was a bitterly cold place that was covered in ice and snow all year round. Under normal circumstances, no cultivators would come to such a desolate place. The reason why the northern region became so lively was because two things happened in the northern region that were enough to affect the nerves of the cultivation world. One of them was caused by the first son of the devil monarch. No wonder the demonic cultivator in the valley left. It was because his whereabouts had been discovered. It was believed that other experts would soon find this place. One had to know that many peerless experts had entered the snow region. They only had two purposes: to find the spiritual land and to kill Chu Ji. Dongfang Chen didn't say anything else. He directly rushed down the snowy peak. Dongfang Long and Beitang Ao also followed. After all, the two of them were in the transcending mortality realm, so they quickly surpassed Dongfang Chen. Soon, they arrived at the entrance of the valley that was surrounded by Yin Qi. This time, without any hesitation, they rushed into the valley together. This was a rare opportunity. As long as they obtained the extreme yin water from the 9 underworld spring, they would be able to extinguish the Yuan spirit lamp in Minister Dan's hand, so that Minister Dan wouldn't be able to find Ji Yufei. It's so cold. After going a few miles deep, Dongfang Chen felt that he was about to be frozen by the surrounding yin qi. The place where yin qi gathered was terrifyingly cold. Even Dongfang Long and Beitang Ao felt that it was difficult to endure. The surroundings were hazy, and all they could see was a grayish-black fog. Their vision was greatly hindered. In the valley, they couldn't see far. They seemed to have entered another world. The thick yin qi seemed to isolate the valley from the outside world. The gloomy and terrifying atmosphere filled every inch of the valley. "Second brother, you can go out," Dongfang Long said. The closer they got to the 9 underworld spring, the thicker the yin qi and the colder the temperature became. Dongfang Chen stopped when he heard this. He knew that he only had the cultivation of awakening me 9th heavenly layer. It was difficult for him to resist the yin qi that spread from the 9 underworld spring. He nodded, then retreated in the direction of the valley entrance. Dongfang Long and Beitang Ao continued to move forward. Traces of battle could be seen everywhere in the valley. The battle just now was extremely fierce. Dongfang Chen retreated to the outside of the valley. He didn't wait for long before he saw Beitang Ao and Dongfang Long coming out of the valley. They didn't say anything and directly left the valley. They got what they wanted to get. Dongfang Chen and the others had just left for a while when a golden light flew from afar. A vague figure was wrapped in the golden light. Riding the golden light and flying in the void, the person who came was a peerless expert. The person directly broke through the yin qi that shrouded the valley and rushed into the valley. Soon, the person rode the golden light and rushed out of the valley. The golden light flashed and went far away in an instant. Under the night sky, a golden light cut through the void and flew over a snowy forest. The golden light faded away, and a middle-aged daoist wearing a cyan robe appeared. Chu Ji ran really fast. The cyan-robed daoist muttered to himself, then stood in the void and looked in all directions. The cyan-robed daoist patted the storage bag on his waist, and a cyan light immediately rushed out of the bag. Then, a simple and unadorned ancient bronze lamp appeared in front of the daoist. On the wick, a soybean-sized cyan light flickered as if it could go out at any time. He should be nearby. Strange. The cyan-robed daoist held the ancient bronze lamp and tested it in all directions. He seemed to be using the ancient lamp to sense something. What the hell is going on? Where did Ji Yufei go? The cyan-robed daoist stopped. The ancient bronze lamp in his hand didn't show any abnormality. This cyan-robed daoist was Dan Chengzi. He found this place by relying on the ancient bronze lamp's guidance. However, what he saw was only an endless snowy forest. There was no trace of Ji Yufei. The ancient bronze lamp in Dan Chengzi's hand was the primordial spirit lamp that Ji Yufei ignited on the day the virtual sky world opened. The fact that the lamp didn't go out meant that he was still alive. The primordial spirit lamp was actually a unique treasure of Taishen sect. By igniting the lamp with blood essence, The primordial spirit lamp and the cultivator who ignited it would have some kind of connection. Jiu Fei was nearby, but Dan Chengzi still couldn't find Jiu Fei. It was very strange. It seemed that someone had used great magic to conceal Jiu Fei's breath, so the primordial spirit lamp couldn't sense Jiu Fei's exact location. Dan Chengzi held the primordial spirit lamp in his hand and flew through the air, searching back and forth within 100 miles. In the vast snowy forest, only the cold night wind blew from time to time. After an hour, Dan Chengzi stopped. He was sure that Jiu Fei was within a few hundred miles, but he couldn't find him. This was very strange. He couldn't figure it out. He thought that some great figure had used great magic to conceal Jiu Fei's breath, but it didn't seem like it. Jiu Fei seemed to have entered another world, and his whereabouts were unpredictable, just like when he was trapped in the virtual sky world. Dan Chengzi was helpless, so he turned into a golden rainbow and left the endless snowy forest. After Minister Dan left, ripples visible to the naked eye suddenly appeared in the air above a certain snowy slope in the forest. Then, a white jade gateway seemed to appear out of thin air, standing tall on the snowy slope. The white jade archway was surrounded by spiritual aura and shrouded in a hazy glow. It was 15 feet high. At this time, a purple figure walked out from behind the archway. This was an extremely beautiful girl who possessed the spiritual wisdom of heaven and earth. She was like a fairy walking in the snow. She looked ethereal and distant. This was a truly otherworldly temperament. This girl in purple was Yang Er. Yang Er looked in the direction where Dan Chengzi disappeared and muttered to herself, "Who was that person? How did he find this place?" She pondered for a while and then withdrew her gaze. Who cares who he is? Even if he was a real immortal, it would be difficult for him to break into the Danding's paradise. I worried too much. As Yang Er spoke, she walked into the white jade archway. As if passing through a layer of transparent water curtain, Yang Er's figure disappeared in the air as if she had walked into another space. Then, the white jade gateway that stood on the snow slope that was surrounded by rays of light also disappeared. On the snow slope, it was as if nothing had happened at all. There were no traces left behind. 3 days later, Yang Er came to the barren small valley again and climbed the white jade high platform in the depths of the valley. On the high platform, a huge fireball was burning. The terrifying heat emitted by the fireball seemed to distort the surrounding void. There was no sound coming from the fireball. Jiu Fei seemed to have been refined in the ancient cauldron. Chapter 336. Above the white jade platform, heat waves billowed. The large fireball suspended in the air was like a sun, emitting a dazzling light. The runes around the high platform were also flashing with a misty light. Countless runes were engraved around the high platform, releasing waves of magical power. A wave of power enveloped the entire high platform, binding the heat emitted from the fireball to the high platform. Yang Er stood in front of the large fireball, and the surrounding heat waves did not seem to affect her at all. Vaguely, within the fireball, a large red cauldron could be seen looming. There seemed to be fire dragons lingering around the large cauldron, and the high temperature caused the void to distort. The alchemy fire array above the primordial chaos pill cauldron gathered spiritual energy from all directions, transforming it into alchemy fire. It was not an ordinary fire, but a Daoist alchemy true fire. Although it was the lowest level of alchemy fire, not even the 3 true fire, the high temperature it emitted was enough to melt ordinary iron. Old Gu, are you dead? If you're not dead, answer me. Yang Er stared at the large fireball suspended in the air and said with a dignified expression. Jiu Fei had been refined by the alchemy fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the primordial chaos pill cauldron. Even Yang Er was not sure if Jiu Fei could survive it. This method could be said to have a slim chance of survival. Jiu Fei was likely to be refined to death by the alchemy fire, but in order to expel the Shenyin ghost qi from Jiu Fei's body, it seemed that only this extreme method could be used. Although Yang Er's voice was not very loud, it was mighty on the high platform. Her voice had a special penetrating power, and the person in the cauldron could definitely hear her voice. No one responded. There were no fluctuations coming from the giant cauldron wrapped in the fireball. Besides the raging fire, the ancient cauldron was silent. Ji Fei in the cauldron seemed to have been refined to death by the endless fire. He can't really be dead, right? Yang could not help but change her expression. She could no longer maintain her calm. Yang hurriedly formed a spiritual art and released magic power, stopping the alchemy fire array above the primordial chaos pill cauldron. The fire gradually sank into the red body of the cauldron, and the flames around the ancient cauldron began to dissipate. The spirit chi that gathered from all directions also dissipated in the void. The primordial chaos pill cauldron gradually stopped spinning and then slowly descended from the sky. With a bang, it landed in the center of the white jade platform. On the white jade platform, there was a huge Dharma array, and the primordial chaos pill cauldron landed right in the middle of it. The great flame on the cauldron had already been extinguished. The bright red cauldron began to return to its original color, and the runes faded into the cauldron. Who? The lid of the cauldron flew up. Then, a fiery red thing flew out from the cauldron and fell on the white jade floor beside the ancient cauldron. Pang! The cauldron lid fell back down and covered the ancient cauldron again. Network It was a man who was hugging his knees and curled up into a ball. His entire body was red like a giant roasted prawn. This person was Ji Fei, who had been thrown into the primordial chaos pill cauldron by Yang and used as a pill to refine for 3 days and 3 nights. The clothes on his body had already turned to ash, and his long hair had already fallen off. His entire body seemed to have been roasted, and some parts of his skin had even fallen off, revealing charred flesh. Ji Fei looked extremely miserable, but he was not dead yet. Yang could sense an extremely weak life force from Ji Fei's body. It was hard to imagine what kind of terrifying torture Ji Fei had gone through in the past 3 days and 3 nights. However, there was no doubt that he had made it through. His will to live was very strong, and could even be considered abnormal. No one could be refined in the cauldron for 3 days and not collapse. Good. Yang heaved a sigh of relief and put down a huge stone in her heart. At the same time, she could not help but look at Ji Fei in a new light. Although his life force was very weak, he had ushered in a new life. Seeing the naked Ji Fei, Yang's face couldn't help but flush red. She took out a set of clothes from her storage pouch and a jade bottle. She uncorked the bottle and poured out a green pill the size of a pigeon egg. A refreshing fragrance of plants immediately filled the air. Yang held the elixir in her palm and used her magic power to turn it into a dark green mist. Then, she controlled the mist to wrap around Ji Fei, who was on the ground. The mist from the green pill contained a huge amount of life energy. It was a huge amount of vitality refined from the spiritual energy of the plants. This vitality constantly seeped into Ji Fei's body. Gradually, Ji Fei's body changed. His red skin began to crack and fall off. The skin that fell off was as translucent as a top-grade jade, shining with a bright luster. The green mist that enveloped Ji Fei's body gradually thinned. Ji Fei's body was like a dry land that desperately needed the nourishment of rain. For Ji Fei, spiritual energy was like rain. After absorbing the spiritual energy from the pill, the weak fluctuation of life energy in Ji Fei's body began to grow stronger. At a speed visible to the naked eye, a new head grew out. The new head was no longer snow-white, but black and shiny. After injecting all the mist from the pill into Ji Fei's body, Yang left the white jade high platform. She knew that Ji Fei would wake up soon. After Yang left, Ji Fei's body began to twitch slightly, and his breathing became rapid. The spiritual energy from the pill had filled his body with vitality. His eyelids were twitching, and his eyeballs could be seen moving under his eyelids. "I'm dying of pain," Ji Fei suddenly screamed. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of turbid air, waking up. He felt a breath stuck in his chest, and it was extremely uncomfortable. He could only desperately breathe in fresh air to relieve the suffocating feeling in his chest. After a long time, he calmed down. "Are you out?" Ji Fei slowly stood up from the ground. He looked around and felt that he was standing on the white jade high platform. The ancient bronze cauldron beside him was still emitting bursts of heat. Ji Fei looked down at his hands. The skin on his arms was as smooth as white jade. It seemed to be even more delicate than a woman's skin. Ji Fei felt that his body seemed to be a little different, as if his flesh and blood had been reborn. After 3 days and 3 nights of tempering, Ji Fei felt that his body seemed to be more powerful than before, as if there was an inexhaustible amount of energy in his body. He put on the clothes that Yang had prepared for him and then left the white jade high platform. Just as Yang opened the mixed essence pill cauldron and released Ji Fei, a figure sitting in a pavilion in a courtyard in Beiling City woke up from his meditation. He patted the storage bag on his waist. An ancient bronze lamp immediately flew out from the storage bag and floated in front of him. The green-robed Taoist sitting on the stone stool was Minister Dan. What's going on? Ji Fei's life aura seems to be getting stronger. Minister Dan waited for a spark on the ancient bronze lamp and muttered to himself. The pea-sized lantern on the ancient lamp was emitting a dazzling green light. The lantern gradually turned into a flickering little flame. What's happening to Ji Fei? Why is his life fluctuating so erratically? Minister Dan frowned. From the strength of the green lantern, he knew that Ji Fei was in a situation where he was about to die. Minister Dan's heart was burning with anxiety. However, he could not find traces of Ji Fei. Ji Fei seemed to be in a strange place and it was difficult to pinpoint his exact location. However, Ji Fei's life aura flourished once again. This meant that his life was no longer in danger. He had taken a trip to the gates of hell and finally walked out. Minister Dan put away the green lantern, stood up from the stone stool, and walked out of the pavilion. After a moment of deep thought, he soared into the sky and turned into a golden ray of light, disappearing into the horizon. It was noon and the sun was high up in the sky. Beiling City was bustling with activity. People who looked like cultivators could be seen walking on the streets and alleys. Minister Dan did not hide his tracks. Many cultivators in Beiling City saw a golden ray of light rushing out of the city and flying into the depths of the snowy forest. In the eyes of an observant person, Minister Dan's whereabouts were no secret at all. Immediately after, a streak of green light also shot out of Beiling City and disappeared into the horizon. On a spirit mountain peak in Pill Cauldron Paradise, Ji Fei relaxed his body and sat cross-legged on a large boulder. His mind sank into an ethereal state. Soon, Ji Fei's consciousness gradually became illusory, as if he had merged with nature. He seemed to have become one with the boulder beneath him, his surroundings, and even the spirit mountain peak. Spiritual energy swirled around the spirit mountain peak, causing the flowers, grass, and trees in the surroundings to constantly tremble. Large amounts of wood power seeped out, as if there were rays of green light drifting about. The spiritual energy in Pill Cauldron Paradise was plentiful. The spirit mountain peak was filled with thriving vegetation, filled with endless wood power. Tiny rays of green light were guided by Ji Fei into his body. The wood power contained an enormous aura of life. Vigorous vitality flowed inside Ji Fei's body. His flesh, internal organs, and bones seemed to be injected with endless life energy. The 18 soul-suppressing nails in Ji Fei's body had long been pulled out. After being refined by the alchemic fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the origin pill cauldron, his flesh and blood had been cleansed countless times by the endless fire element spirit energy. The mystic yin ghost qi in his flesh and blood had long been expelled from his body. Countless evil souls were also completely refined by the alchemic fire along with the dissipation of the mystic yin ghost qi. However, the mystic yin ghost qi in Ji Fei's body had long penetrated deep into his bones. Even with such extreme methods, he still could not expel the mystic yin ghost qi from his bones. According to Yang, he would have to suffer one more time before he could completely expel the mystic yin ghost qi from his body. Right now, Ji Fei only had one goal, and that was to make his life force exuberant. As time passed, the green vitality from all directions converged towards Ji Fei. It could even be clearly seen by the naked eye. A dense green mist swirled around Ji Fei. Before he knew it, 2 days had passed. The injuries caused by the alchemic fire had completely healed. His body seemed to have been infused with endless vitality. Energy surged violently in his body, but he still continued to cultivate. As for Minister Dan, he held the origin soul green lamp and searched the endless sea of trees for 2 days. During these 2 days, the flame from the Origin Soul green lamp in his hand grew even more resplendent. Minister Dan had searched almost every inch of land within several hundred miles, but he still could not find a trace of Gu Fei. Minister Dan could not help but feel a sense of helplessness. Gu Fei was in this forest, but he could not find Gu Fei. It was very strange. There seemed to be an unfathomable power that separated him and Gu Fei into 2 different spaces. Minister Dan felt as if he could not grasp or touch Gu Fei. That night, the moonlight was hazy. Beasts roared in the distance. In the endless forest, a speck of green light moved like a will-o'-the-wisp. Unknowingly, a faint mist began to rise in the forest. The mist drifted with the wind, causing the entire forest to become blurry. It gave off an ethereal feeling. The mist could not obstruct the radiance of the green light. Suddenly, without any warning, the moving green light in the mist was extinguished. Then, an angry roar resounded from within the mist. The rolling sound waves shook the forest, causing the mist in the forest to surge violently. "Who is it? Come out." Minister Dan stood in the void. His eyes emitted 2 sharp rays of light that were as sharp as the edge of a blade. He angrily scanned the surroundings. In his hand, he held an ancient bronze lamp that had already been extinguished. He had just been ambushed. He did not know what method the person in the dark had used to extinguish his Yuan spirit lamp. Hee. A cold laugh rang out from the depths of the snowy forest. Then, a ray of green light broke through the mist below the snowy forest and charged out. "How dare you?" Minister Dan was furious. He put away the ancient bronze lamp and rose into the air, chasing after the ray of green light. He wanted to see who dared to ambush him. Once the Yuan spirit lamp was extinguished, unless Gu Fei used his own blood to reignite it, no one else could reignite Gu Fei's Yuan spirit lamp. Swoosh, swoosh. 2 rays of light, one green and one gold, disappeared into the night sky in the blink of an eye like lightning. The fog that lingered in the snow forest gradually dispersed. The mist in the forest seemed to be a trick of the mysterious expert who had secretly extinguished Minister Dan's Yuan spirit lamp. There was a lot of mist in the forest. Minister Dan did not think there was anything wrong with it. Because of this, the person's sneak attack was successful. The extinguishing of the Yuan spirit lamp made Minister Dan furious. He chased closely behind that person, and from time to time, he would shoot out beams of light that bombarded that person. However, the hazy figure wrapped in the green light did not plan to fight Minister Dan. He repeatedly dodged the golden streaks that Minister Dan shot out and continuously fled forward. "Who are you, scoundrel? If you have the guts, stop and fight," Minister Dan shouted. His voice reverberated in the air and traveled far. The person in front of him did not reply. He did not care about Minister Dan at all. The speed at which an unparalleled expert flew through the air was incomparably fast. In a short while, 2 rays of light rushed out of the forest and into the depths of the mountain. This book. Chapter 337. Under the moonlight, the depths of the snow-capped mountains were no longer peaceful. Beams of strong light shot out and terrifying energy waves spread out, causing all the nearby snow-capped peaks to experience avalanches. The birds and beasts that lived in the snow-capped mountains fled in shock. Peerless masters were fighting in the depths of the snow-capped mountains. One of them was the enraged Minister Dan. The battle did not last long before the depths of the snow-capped mountains gradually calmed down. A golden ray of light shot out from the depths of the snow-capped mountains and flew towards Bustling City. One of the peerless masters did not come out from the snow-capped mountains. No one knew where he went. At dawn, a white figure walked into a courtyard at the back of the Yunlai Inn in Bustling City. It was a handsome young man dressed in white. "Come in." The young man went straight to a room in the courtyard. Just as he was about to knock on the door, an old but calm voice came from inside. The young man respectfully pushed the door open and carefully closed it. The young man entered the room and saw that it was decorated in an antique style. A screen separated the room into 2 parts. The front was the living room, and behind the screen was the bedroom. The room was not gorgeous. The young man stood in front of the screen with his head down. He did not go into the back. He seemed to be very respectful to the owner of the room and did not dare to act presumptuously. "I know why you are here. Don't worry, the light has been extinguished." The old voice came from behind the screen. When the young man heard this, he could not help but reveal a smile on his face. "You can leave." The person in the room seemed to be a little annoyed. "Yes." The white-clothed young man didn't say much. After he heard the man's words, he bowed towards the screen and left the room. "Second brother, what did the ancestor say?" After the young man left the courtyard, a young man with a simple long sword on his waist walked towards him. This person was Dongfang Long, and the person Dongfang Long called second brother was none other than Dongfang Chen. "It's rare that the ancestor is willing to help. The matter has been resolved." Dongfang Chen seemed to be very happy. Dongfang Long nodded and said, "Very good, this has bought us a lot of time. The entire north is filled with our Dongfang clan and Beitang clan's eyes. As soon as Ji Yufei appears, kill him. This time, don't fail again," Dongfang Chen said with a gloomy face. Dongfang Long nodded and the two of them quickly left. In the Pill Cauldron Paradise, on the peak of a spiritual mountain, Ji Yufei faced the rising sun and sat cross-legged on a large rock. For the past 2 days, it was as if he could not feel the passage of time. He seemed to have merged with nature, his body and mind condensed together with this spiritual peak, blending with heaven and earth. This was a miraculous state. He seemed to be able to hear the thoughts of the trees and flowers, understand the words of birds and beasts, and sense the pulse of the earth. He seemed to have truly blended into this vibrant world, as if he had become a part of it. The breeze gently blew, and the fragrance of all kinds of plants and flowers slowly rippled in the forest. The rising sun was not dazzling. Like water ripples, it shrouded the entire spiritual peak with a faint layer of golden gauze. Ji Yufei stood up from the large rock. Looking at the rising sun, at this moment, he felt incomparably calm. He also felt the vitality between heaven and earth. Ji Yufei seemed to have a feeling of enlightenment in his heart. A touch of the morning glow cut through the dawn, and rays of golden light sprinkled on the mountain forest that was surrounded by spiritual energy. Infinite vitality rippled, apes cried, tigers roared, birds chirped, and insects chirped. Ji Yufei took a deep breath, and his whole body felt comfortable. As Ji Yufei circulated his profound cultivation technique, his body became like a vast ocean that sucked in all the spiritual energy from the surroundings. The essence of the sun, the moon, the wood, and all the other energies that floated in the air were all gathered towards him. Streams of light, which were almost invisible to the naked eye, circulated inside Ji Yufei's body, nourishing his body like sweet dew, covering his internal organs, bones, flesh, and blood with a layer of precious light. Sitting on the mountaintop for 2 days and 2 nights was not completely fruitless. His state of mind had been improved, and his body seemed to be filled with endless vitality. The essence of heaven and earth was like cold water, washing his flesh and blood over and over again. He tried to activate the pure essence of the sun that was released when the sun rose. He wanted to use the essence of the sun, the pure yang energy, to dispel the remaining ghost qi in his bone marrow. However, he seemed to have failed. The essence of the sun was not that easy to absorb, and the timing was very important. Obviously, Ji Yufei did not grasp this fleeting opportunity. Standing on the top of the spiritual peak, Ji Yufei breathed in and out the spiritual energy from all directions, pouring endless spiritual energy into his exhausted body. It wasn't until noon that the gathered spiritual qi drifted away. He stopped and sensed the surging energy in his body. He had to admit that the spiritual energy in the Pill Cauldron Paradise was really abundant. This place was indeed a treasure land for cultivation. When Ji Yufei stopped operating the mysterious technique, a bone-piercing coldness came from the depths of his body, making him shiver involuntarily. It seemed that the ghost qi that had penetrated deep into his bone marrow was really hard to dispel with his own power. However, this was already good enough. After all, his body had regained its vitality, and the 18 soul-suppressing nails had been pulled out. His soul sense was no longer suppressed. Not only could the 18 soul-suppressing nails suppress the ghost qi in his body, but they also completely suppressed Ji Yufei's soul sense inside his body, which made it impossible for him to open the space inside his body. Standing on the top of the mountain, Ji Yufei carefully used his soul sense to communicate with the space inside his mudpill palace. The purple vertical scar that had disappeared between his eyebrows began to appear on his skin. Gradually, the vertical scar emitted a misty purple light. Ji Yufei's soul sense had successfully communicated with the space inside his body. His real body did not enter the space, but a wisp of his soul sense had descended into the space inside. He was very worried that because of his body, the space that he had opened up would be destroyed, and even turn into a piece of chaos. However, he seemed to have worried too much. A giant cauldron that emitted an endless aura, as if it had existed since the beginning of the world, was suppressing the center of the space. Traces of chaotic energy that were visible to the naked eye were guided by the mountain and river cauldron. Ji Yufei found that not only did his space not collapse because of the decay of his body, but it was also gradually expanding. The mountain and river cauldron refined the chaotic energy and suppressed the space. At the same time, it was also continuously pouring energy into Ji Yufei's space, causing the space to gradually expand. Of course, the growth of the space inside was very slow. It had been a long time since Ji Yufei moved the mountain and river cauldron from the chaotic zone into the space inside his space, but Ji Yufei found that his space had only expanded to about 60 meters in radius. When he was in the virtual sky world, the old turtle once said that the inner world was closely related to a cultivator's body. As one's strength increased, the inner world would also grow. The stronger one was, the bigger the inner world would be. However, if one's cultivation level regressed, the inner world would also collapse and shrink. According to Ji Yufei's situation, when his body deteriorated to the extreme, his inner world would have collapsed long ago. Ji Yufei's luck was really good. There was a unique mountain and river cauldron suppressing the void in all directions in his inner world. Even though Ji Yufei was seriously injured and on the verge of death, his inner world still showed no signs of collapsing. The mountain and river cauldron could suppress the earth veins in all directions. It was definitely a treasure. Ji Yufei found that the 5 or 6 spiritual plants planted in his inner world emitted a floral fragrance. Their branches and leaves were shrouded in a faint misty glow. The spiritual plants didn't show any signs of withering. Instead, they were growing very well. The surroundings of the spiritual plants were green and green grass grew on the ground. Ji Yufei's inner world was no longer lonely and lifeless. After his divine comprehension retreated from the inner world, Ji Yufei jumped down from the boulder and walked down the mountain. He wanted to find out what method Yang planned to use to dispel the mysterious yin ghost aura that had already penetrated into his bones. Minister Dan was very angry and also very depressed. Someone destroyed Ji Yufei's green lamp, which made him furious and flustered. Because without the guidance of the green lamp, it would be very difficult for him to find Ji Yufei. The hopes of the elders of the sect were all on Ji Yufei. Minister Dan was actually shouldering a heavy responsibility. After the trip to the virtual sky world, the elders of the 3 great Daoist sects didn't find any trace of the 9-colored longevity grass on the other disciples. In the virtual sky world, everyone saw that it was Ji Yufei who took the 3 9-colored longevity grass. Because of this, the head of the Taishen sect and a group of elders used their great magical power and used the green lamp as a guide to keep an eye on Ji Yufei's life and whereabouts. When the green lamp sensed that Ji Yufei had left the virtual sky world, the higher-ups of the 3 great Daoist sects were alarmed. The Taishen sect immediately sent Minister Dan down the mountain to search for Ji Yufei's whereabouts. Ji Yufei became the disciple that the 3 great Daoist sects paid the most attention to. Of course, what attracted the higher-ups of the 3 great Daoist sects wasn't Ji Yufei himself, but the things he had. In the evening, in Beiling City, a person came to the courtyard where Minister Dan was staying. Minister Dan respectfully invited this person to a side room, then stood to the side and waited on him carefully. Although he was already a peerless expert in the void controlling realm, he still didn't dare to show the slightest disrespect in front of this person. How did it go? Daoist Chao Yang, who was sitting high in the hall, asked calmly. He wore a purple jade Daoist crown, 9 suns shining in the sky, and the golden crow burning sky robe. Martial uncle, Ji Yufei is missing, and the green lamp of the 9-colored primordial spirit has also been extinguished. Although Minister Dan was a little hesitant, he didn't dare to hide anything in front of Daoist Chaoyang. What happened? When Daoist Chaoyang heard this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, and an invisible momentum immediately spread in the room. Minister Dan suddenly felt as if his chest was suddenly pressed down by a 1,000-kilogram boulder. He felt like he was suffocating, and his breathing became a little rapid. His forehead was also covered in cold sweat. This book was first published. Chapter 338. As night fell, a bright moon appeared in the sky, sprinkling down cold moonlight that shrouded the icy and snowy northern land in a layer of light gauze. Network, swoosh. A figure suddenly appeared in the sky above an endless snowy forest in the northern land as if it had teleported. This person wore a purple jade crown on his head and a golden crow sky-burning robe of the 9 suns' brilliant sky. There seemed to be flames flowing all over his body. He was Taoist Chaoyang of the Shaoyang peak of the Taishen sect. Swoosh. A golden rainbow suddenly appeared in the distant sky, like a golden bolt of lightning, cutting through the void and flying quickly toward Taoist Chaoyang. Ji Fei is nearby? Taoist Chaoyang's eyes seemed to have no spirit, but it was as if he had a magical power that could penetrate the void, as if he could see anything he wanted to see. He glanced around but did not feel anything strange. What he saw in front of him was just a common snowy forest in the northern land. At this time, the golden light that appeared in the distant sky had already flown in front of him, and a powerful wave of spiritual power immediately spread out. The golden light dissipated, and a figure appeared next to Taoist Chaoyang. "Is it here?" Taoist Chaoyang asked. The person who came in the golden rainbow was Dan Chengzi. When he heard the question, he immediately replied, "Yes, but even with the spirit lamp in hand, I can't find Ji Fei." Before the spirit lamp was extinguished, Dan Chengzi had tracked Ji Fei more than once, but it was difficult to find any trace of Ji Fei. Although they were both cultivators in the royal void realm, Taoist Chaoyang's strength and seniority were not comparable to Dan Chengzi, who had just broken through to the royal void realm. Even among cultivators in the same realm, there were strong and weak ones. With Taoist Chaoyang's cultivation, it could be said that it was easy to kill a peerless cultivator like Dan Chengzi. Strange. Taoist Chaoyang stood in the void, and there was a trace of doubt on his face. He could not feel any human aura nearby, which meant that Ji Fei had not appeared nearby. Daoist Chaoyang's divine will was extremely powerful. Once it was spread out, he could see everything within a radius of tens of miles like the back of his hand. It was even clearer than using his eyes to see. As long as someone was hiding nearby, they would definitely not be able to escape the detection of his spiritual force. The surroundings were very quiet. Only the occasional roars of beasts could be heard from the depths of the snowy forest. Other than the birds and beasts that resided in the forest, there were no other signs of life. Daoist Chaoyang was very proud of his own cultivation. Apart from demigods, there were only a few people in the world who could beat him. If there was something strange about this place, it would not escape Taoist Chaoyang's eyes. If someone had really hidden Ji Fei with great magical power, and even Taoist Chaoyang had been deceived, then this person was definitely not someone he could provoke. "Yes. Looks like it's time to meet some old friends in Bustling City," Daoist Chaoyang said calmly. "Let's go back." After saying that, Daoist Chaoyang's figure disappeared in the air. Daoist Chaoyang's speed was too fast. Even Minister Dan, who was standing next to him, could not tell how he left. Minister Dan could not help but be shocked. Daoist Chaoyang's cultivation was much stronger than his. Daoist Chaoyang's speed seemed to be comparable to teleportation. Of course, the legendary magical power of teleportation could only be performed by a peerless demigod. Minister Dan did not dare to delay. He rose into the air and turned into a dazzling golden rainbow. He flew in the direction of Bustling City and disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. Of course, Daoist Chaoyang's arrival did not go unnoticed by the old monsters in Bustling City. The situation in Bustling City became even more delicate. There were many undercurrents, and a storm was brewing. Compared to Bustling City, the Pill Cauldron's grotto was quiet. There was no ice or snow here, and the temperature was warm. Several mountain peaks were filled with green. There was a small bridge that spanned over the flowing water, and flowers bloomed beside the stream. Cranes flew across the sky from time to time. A herd of spiritual deer chased each other on the grassland between the mountains. All sorts of spiritual herbs were planted on the cultivated slopes. The Pill Cauldron's grotto was definitely a blessed land for immortals. It was hard to imagine that there would be such a grotto in the snowy northern lands. This place was isolated from the rest of the world and was filled with spiritual energy. It was no wonder that even the old monsters who had not come out for a long time were alarmed. Unfortunately, this spiritual land already had an owner. The ancestors of the Pill Cauldron Gate had spent a lot of effort to set up a peerless formation to isolate this spiritual land from the rest of the world, forming a grotto. This grotto was independent from the world, but it was also closely connected to the world. The spiritual veins of the earth were the foundation of this small world. It was hard to imagine that with this grotto as the foundation, the Pill Cauldron's grotto still declined. Unless the peerless formation outside the Pill Cauldron's grotto was broken, the Pill Cauldron's grotto would never be revealed to the world. Even a powerhouse like Daoist Chao Yang could not sense the existence of the grotto. In order to help Ji Yufei get rid of the Shenyan ghost qi that was entangled in his bone marrow, Yang had been busy with something for the past few days. She seemed to be making something. Ji Yufei asked a few times, but Yang pretended to be mysterious and ran away. Network, Ji Yufei had no choice but to find a place to circulate his mystic art and breathe in and out spiritual energy. He wanted to use the endless spiritual energy to temper his muscles and bones, using this method to get rid of the Shenyan ghost qi deep in his bone marrow bit by bit. But soon, Ji Yufei felt that his method did not seem to work at all. The uncomfortable feeling of coldness coming out from his bone marrow still happened a few times a day. Every time he did it, his body would feel cold and his blood and qi seemed to be condensing. This was like a bone-deep gangrene. With his ability, there was no way he could get rid of the Shenyan ghost qi deep in his bone marrow. One morning 3 days later, Yang found Ji Yufei at the peak of a spiritual mountain. "Follow me." Yang roused Ji Yufei from his deep meditation. This was the first sentence she said to Ji Yufei. She seemed to be a little excited. "Where to?" Ji Yufei asked. "Just follow me. Of course, if you don't want to get better, you can continue to meditate here." Yang revealed a sly smile and walked straight down the mountain. "Wait for me." Ji Yufei hurriedly chased after her. Although he had vaguely guessed why Yang came to find him, he still could not keep calm. One had to know that the Shenyan ghost qi deep in his bone marrow would come out several times a day. That kind of feeling was not pleasant. Yang brought Ji Yufei to an ancient altar in the Pill Cauldron grotto and walked up. Ji Yufei felt that this altar seemed to be made of purple jade. Every purple jade brick was engraved with ancient runes. The altar was 15 feet wide and emitted a misty purple glow. After walking up the altar, Ji Yufei discovered that the ground of the altar was also engraved with countless runes. The countless runes seemed to form a huge formation. Ji Yufei did not set foot in the formation. He could not figure out the function of the formation on the altar. Apart from the runes engraved on the purple jade ground, there was nothing else on the altar. Ji Yufei was a little surprised. Why did Yang bring him here? He was about to ask, but at that moment, Yang signaled Ji Yufei to stand in the center of the altar. Yang came to Ji Yufei's side and took out a jade talisman from her storage bag. She handed it to Ji Yufei and said, "Take it. It will be useful when we return." Ji Yufei took the jade talisman and saw that both sides of the jade talisman were also engraved with runes. Moreover, Ji Yufei felt that the runes on the jade talisman in his hand and the runes on the altar seemed to come from the same source. Yang hands formed hand seals. Then, the ancient purple jade altar immediately emitted a strong energy fluctuation. The runes engraved on the entire altar gradually lit up. The ancient altar obviously contained an incomparably strong energy. Yang hands continuously formed hand seals to guide this originally dormant power out. Rumble. The entire altar began to shake. Then, thousands of runes rushed out from the altar as if they had come to life. They formed a mysterious formation that enveloped Jiyu Fei and Yang who stood in the center of the altar. Jiyu Fei was shocked. This altar seemed to be a teleportation formation. Swoosh! There was a tremor in the void as ripples spread out from the center of the altar. Thousands of light talismans formed an array. The instant Yang and Jiyu Fei were enveloped, the two of them disappeared from the altar. Thousands of light runes dissipated on the altar. The runes engraved on the altar also gradually dimmed. The energy contained in the altar also quieted down. The space was twisting. Jiyu Fei felt as if he had stepped into a void tunnel. A strange feeling welled up in his heart. This feeling was not unfamiliar to him. There was no sky, no earth. It was as if he was walking in an endless void. He had no idea where he was going. Rays of light became the only thing in Jiyu Fei's eyes. After an unknown period of time, Jiyu Fei felt as if he was riding on the clouds, as if he was traveling at an extremely high speed. When the surrounding rays of light gradually disappeared, a gloomy void appeared in front of Jiyu Fei. He did not know when it started, but the surrounding space began to twist and ripples of energy spread out. Rumble. After a loud noise, a dazzling light suddenly burst out from the front. Jiyu Fei had to close his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, the dark sky flashed with strong lights from time to time. Boom! A thunderclap sounded in Jiyu Fei's ears. Silver snakes danced in the sky and lightning lit up the heaven and earth. Jiyu Fei could not help but be shocked by the scene in front of him. He looked around and saw that he and Yang were standing on a small hill. Under their feet was a formation engraved on a rock with a circumference of 5 jong. The runes on the formation were very similar to the runes on the purple jade altar in the Pill Cauldron Wonderland. What is this place? Jiyu Fei asked. He felt that the heaven and earth were gloomy. Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed, illuminating the gloomy void from time to time. Apart from the small hill where he and Yang were standing, there were lush weeds everywhere. Between the weeds, there were water droplets. This place seemed to be a swamp. This is the lightning lake, Yang said. Rumble. At this time, another earth-shattering thunder came from the sky. Although the sky was gloomy, it was strange that there was only thunder but no rain. Lightning Lake. Jiyu Fei couldn't help being startled. He knew of this place. It was a dangerous place, a place where the lightning energy of heaven and earth gathered. The Lightning Lake could be said to be one of the most dangerous places in the Tenglong continent. Jiyu Fei had seen descriptions of the Lightning Lake in his sect's records. We've been teleported to the Lightning Lake thousands of miles away? Jiyu Fei exclaimed. One must know that the Lightning Lake was not in the northern lands. Although it was within the borders of northern Wei, it was at least 3,000 miles away from the northern mountain city. Hehe, that's right. You will be staying here for a few days. Yang smiled. When she smiled, she looked like a little fox who had succeeded in her evil plan. Jiyu Fei couldn't help being stunned for a moment before he asked, "What exactly do you want?" Yang smile made his hair stand on end. "Let's go. Let's find a place with dense lightning." Yang didn't answer Jiyu Fei. Instead, she walked out of the formation and looked at the sky from the small hill. She saw thick thunderclouds surging in the east and south. The lightning in the thunderclouds was denser and more frequent than the lightning in the other two directions. Most of the thunder came from these two directions, shaking the heaven and earth. "Let's go to the east. There's a grassland under the thunderclouds. It's just the right place," Yang said and rushed down the small hill. Like a purple smoke, she headed east. Jiyu Fei had no choice but to follow her. The swamp here was different from the deathly swamp inside the virtual sky world. This place was full of the aura of thunder and lightning, and there seemed to be a burning smell in the air. The death swamp in the virtual sky world, on the other hand, was lifeless and a paradise for the undead. Roar. Just as Yang rushed to the grassland under the thunderclouds, an unforeseen event occurred. A low and deep roar seemed to come from the depths of the earth. Then, the grassland under Yang's feet began to tremble, as if something was about to rush out from the ground. Yang quickly retreated. Pang! Bang! The grassland suddenly exploded. Soil splashed in all directions, and an unusual beast rushed out of the ground. "What's that?" Ji Fei, who was following closely behind Yang hurriedly came to a halt. He stared at the exotic beast that had rushed out from the ground in shock. The exotic beast was 4 to 5 meters long and had the appearance of a huge green lion. However, there was a single silver horn on its ferocious head. Roar! The unusual beast looked up to the sky and roared. Its voice shook the sky. A burst of crackling lightning came out of its body. At the same time, a fierce murderous aura surged out of its body. Chapter 339. The lightning lion beast was a ferocious beast in the Thunder Lake that could control the power of thunder and lightning. It had a violent temperament and was fond of fighting. Once it sensed any beast or human cultivator intruding into its territory, it would immediately attack. It was obvious that Yang and Ji Fei had intruded into the territory of a lightning lion. Roar! The lightning lion charged out from the swamp and let out a series of roars. Its body was surrounded by lightning, and a violent aura filled every inch of the sky. Ji Fei sensed that this lightning lion seemed to possess a powerful strength. He could feel the power of thunder and lightning in the surroundings converging toward the lightning lion floating in the sky. Swoosh! A pair of azure-colored wings extended from the lightning lion's ribs. Arcs of azure-colored lightning blossomed on the wings, crackling chaotically. Yang was still standing on the grass, staring calmly at the lightning lion in the sky. Even though she knew that the lightning lion was gathering its power, she did not make a move. The lightning lion was infuriated by the fact that there was someone who didn't know life from death trespassing into its territory. The consequences were terrifying. Lightning began to strike down from the thunderclouds, striking the silver horn on the lightning lion's head. This lightning lion was extraordinary, as it was able to control the powerful force of thunder and lightning accumulated in the thunderclouds. The horn on the head of the lightning lion continued to absorb the power of thunder and lightning from all directions. The silver horn began to emit a brilliant glow, and a powerful energy wave was emitted from the horn. Roar! The lightning lion let out a furious roar. Swoosh! Then, a green lightning bolt as thick as a child's arm shot out from the horn, and struck towards Yang below. The blue lightning bolt tore through the sky and emitted a blinding light that lit up the heavens and earth. Ji Fei stood aside and watched the scene quietly. Although he knew that Yang had a high cultivation, he had never seen her make a move before. Yang simply reached out her right hand and pressed forward. Bang! With a bang, the lightning bolt that was bombarding towards Yang seemed to have collided with an invisible wall. It was stopped less than 10 feet in front of Yang by a mysterious force. Yang easily nullified the attack of the lightning lion. After that, Yang waved her right hand lightly. Bang! The lightning lion was directly blasted flying by a powerful force. Roar! The lightning lion roared again and again as it was blasted flying 30 to 40 meters away. Only then did it stop retreating. After that, it flapped its wings that were coiled with lightning and transformed into an azure bolt of lightning as it charged towards Yang. Outrageous! Since you want to die, I'll grant your wish. Yang expression turned extremely cold. She had only sent the lightning lion flying just now, hoping that the lightning lion would know how powerful it was and leave. However, the violent lion did not seem to appreciate her kindness and charged forward in an instant. Of lightning. Crackle, crackle, crackle. Endless lightning flashed in the void around the lightning lion, interweaving into a net of lightning power that enveloped Yang. Ji Fei quickly retreated and looked at Yang with interest. He wanted to see what kind of tricks she had up her sleeves. A powerful wave of magic power surged out from Yang body, and her hair started to flutter even though there was no wind. Then, dark green vines started to grow under her feet, and they started to twine around the lightning lion in the sky. At the same time, Yang pressed her right hand upward, and the thousands of lightning bolts that shrouded the lightning lion immediately dispersed and dissipated in the sky. At this moment, the lightning lion seemed to have sensed danger and tried to escape. However, it was too late. Countless vines, like green dragons, instantly entangled the lightning lion in the sky. 2 vines entangled the wings of the lightning lion and tore them off. The lightning lion immediately let out an earth-shattering roar. A large amount of blood sprayed from the sky. The lightning lion that had lost its wings fell from the sky. Before it hit the ground, a bone-chilling sound of bones breaking could be heard. Bang! Muddy water splashed everywhere as the huge body of the lightning lion smashed heavily onto the turf. Then, it slowly sank into the mud beneath the turf. The powerful and violent lightning lion had been strangled to death by Yang Er. After the vines strangled the lightning lion to death, they seemed to have lost their vitality and quickly withered. Then, they turned into dust and drifted into the sky. Wood elemental techniques. Ji Fei was a little surprised. He could feel that Yang Er's body was exuding a vigorous aura. It was as if she was the embodiment of the spirit of vegetation. Ji Fei was no stranger to the fluctuation of qi that was full of vitality. In the Taishan sect, there were many people who cultivated wood elemental techniques. In the Taishan sect, Ziyu, a disciple of the sect leader, was one of the best. Impressive, impressive. Ji Fei clapped his hands and walked slowly toward Yang Er. Are you praising me or insulting me? Yang Er smiled sweetly. Her beautiful face bloomed with infinite brilliance, and Ji Fei's eyes suddenly lit up. Hee. Of course I'm praising you. How would I dare to insult you? Ji Fei rubbed his nose and said awkwardly. He had to admit that Yang Er's smile was very lethal. Me. I don't think you would dare. Yang Er waved her fist at Ji Fei and said fiercely. She was like an innocent girl, but compared to the vicious methods she had used just now, she felt a little out of place. The sky was still gloomy. In the sky, lightning flashed and thunder roared. The dark thunderclouds seemed to be hanging down to the ground, and bolts of lightning danced wildly in the thunderclouds. The sound of thunder was endless, and from time to time, there would be terrifying lightning striking down from the sky. Ji Fei and Yang Er stopped joking. They came to a grassy area covered by thunderclouds, and Yang Er took out a big thing from her storage bag. It was a huge lamp, its four sides were covered with white cloth, and the top was also tightly sealed with white cloth. The bottom was empty, and on the iron frame at the bottom, there was an iron bucket filled with lamp oil, with a wick as thick as a child's arm immersed in it. There were talismans drawn on the white cloth around the huge lamp. Each talisman was emitting a faint spiritual energy. What's the use of this? Ji Fei asked. He didn't know what Yang Er wanted to use this huge lamp for. This huge lamp has a name. It's called the Kongming lamp. As Yang Er spoke, she took out a metal chain from her storage bag. This metal chain was at least 100 meters long. Kongming lamp. Ji Fei said. Yes. Legend has it that in ancient times, there was an almighty expert who was proficient in formations. His name was Zhuge Kongming. The Kongming lamp was created by him. Yang Er said. I've never heard of him. Ji Fei said with some embarrassment. I also read about the Kongming lamp in the sect's book collection. The Kongming lamp can fly into the sky without using any spells or external forces, Yang Er said to Ji Fei as she tied one end of the metal chain to the lamp frame below the Kongming lamp. Could it be? Ji Fei's expression suddenly changed. He had already vaguely guessed what Yang Er wanted to do. Hehe, that's right. I'm going to release this Kongming lamp into the sky and draw the power of thunder and lightning from the thunderclouds. Yang Er said proudly. As she spoke, she lit up the huge Kongming lamp. The flame of the lamp burned fiercely, and the huge lamp slowly rose from the ground in front of Ji Fei and Yang Er. All right, you can enjoy the baptism of thunder and lightning here. Yang Er smiled slyly and suddenly used the fixed body technique on Ji Fei. Ji Fei suddenly felt his body stiffen, and he was fixed on the spot. Yang Er tied the other end of the metal chain to Ji Fei's waist. Then, she took out a large stone from her storage bag and another metal chain from her storage bag. She tied Ji Fei firmly to the large stone like a dumpling. Ji Fei could not speak. His eyes darted around and his face turned green. The power of sky thunder was not something that anyone could withstand. It was extremely dangerous to attract sky thunder to one's body. Legend had it that when a great cultivator who had stepped into the immortal realm ascended, heaven and earth would send down a lightning tribulation. Only those who could survive the lightning tribulation could finally ascend to the immortal realm. Those who could not survive the lightning tribulation would be destroyed by the sky thunder and turned into ashes. Jiyu Fei did not think that with his current cultivation, he could resist the power of thunder and lightning that came from heaven and earth. Oh, I almost forgot. Yang Er was about to leave when she suddenly thought of something. Then, she pointed with her finger and Jiyu Fei's right hand, which was holding the jade talisman, was immediately able to move. All right, if you really can't withstand it, crush the jade talisman. The power in the jade talisman can teleport you back to the pill cauldron paradise. After saying that, Yang Er quickly left. At this time, the slowly rising Kongming lantern was about to touch the thick thunderclouds that were pressing down from the sky. Dark clouds pressed down, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. With a strong flash, lightning swam through the thunderclouds like silver snakes. Suddenly, a deafening thunder exploded above Jiyu Fei's head. The power of the thunder was earth-shattering. A bolt of lightning struck down from the thunderclouds and hit the flying Kongming lantern. A bright electric current immediately flowed down the metal chain at the bottom of the lantern. Jiyu Fei felt a dangerous aura and wanted to crush the jade talisman, but in the end, he did not do so. Perhaps only the baptism of sky thunder could expel the Xianyin ghost qi from his body. Wow! The power of thunder and lightning flowed along the chains and entered Jiyu Fei's body. In an instant, it broke the fixed body technique on Jiyu Fei's body. A miserable howl immediately escaped his mouth. Jiyu Fei opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of white smoke. He raised his head to look at the rolling thunderclouds in the sky and roared, "How refreshing! Let's make it more violent." Boom! Another clap of thunder boomed overhead, and another bolt of lightning struck the sky lantern in the sky. Roar! Damned heavens! Come! Jiyu Fei endured it and shouted crazily. Bolts of lightning kept striking the Kongming lantern, and Jiyu Fei's roars rang out continuously, spreading far and wide. This book. Chapter 340. There was no lack of ferocious beasts in the Thunder Lake. However, none of them dared to approach a certain place. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. The grass within a radius of a few hundred feet was scorched. There was an extremely crazy man who was attracting the power of lightning from the heavens and earth under the rumbling thunderclouds. His cries of agony were incessant and could even be heard louder than the sound of the thunder. On a grassy slope in the distance, a graceful figure in purple calmly watched the shocking scene unfold before her. There was no expression on her extremely delicate face. Thunder clouds loomed in front of them as tens of thousands of lightning bolts swam in the clouds. A violent aura that could shock all living beings in the heavens and earth was emitted from the thunderclouds. The Thunder Lake was a strange place in the Tinglong continent. Here, the power of thunder and lightning gathered. Dark thunder clouds hung down from the sky. Terrifying lightning struck from the thunderclouds, connecting the sky and the earth. Some of the lightning even struck the ground. There was no wind or rain. There was only thunder here, and it rarely rained. However, the water in the Thunder Lake was sufficient because it was a swamp. It was difficult to see the sun in the Thunder Lake. However, terrifying lightning bolts would strike down from the sky and strike the ground. The powerful lightning bolts would often strike the soft grass and create huge pits, forming the unique landform of the Thunder Lake. Large and small round ponds were scattered across the entire Thunder Lake like pearls embedded in a piece of jade. Yang Er and Jiyu Fei were only at the periphery of the Thunder Lake. They did not venture deep into the Thunder Lake because there were unpredictable dangers in the depths of the Thunder Lake. The power of lightning there was stronger and the ferocious beasts there were stronger. Only cultivators with a high cultivation base could venture deep into the Thunder Lake. The reason why Jiyu Fei and Yang Er came to the Thunder Lake was to borrow the power of lightning to expel the Xianyin ghost qi from Jiyu Fei's body. They were not here for an adventure. One should know that the Thunder Lake was one of the most dangerous places in the soaring dragon continent. The power of lightning in the depths of the Thunder Lake was enough to scare even a void-controlling realm expert. The lightning energy outside the Thunder Lake was within the range that Jiyu Fei could withstand. Of course, if he had not been thrown into the primordial pill cauldron by Yang Er and refined with hundreds of spirit medicines for 3 days and 3 nights, allowing his body to regain its vitality, his deteriorating body would definitely not have been able to withstand the power of thunder and lightning here. It's already the 98th time. Old Gu seems to be stronger than I imagined. Yang mumbled to herself on a grassy slope in the distance. She stared calmly at the scene before her without any expression on her face. Gu Fei had already been struck 198 times by the power of lightning guided by the Kongming lantern, but his voice was still loud and clear, full of energy. Hey, I want to see how long you can hold on before you crush the jade talisman in your hand. Yang watched with interest. In the distance, Gu Fei, who was tied to a huge rock, was charred on the outside and tender on the inside by the power of lightning. The clothes on his upper body had long been burnt to ashes, and only a piece of rag was left on his lower body, which barely covered his important parts. Even the huge rock behind him had cracks on it, as though it could be smashed by the next bolt of lightning at any time. It had to be said that Yang was very thoughtful and well prepared. The Kongming lantern, the 100-foot-long metal chain, and the huge rock that weighed thousands of kilograms were all for the sake of letting Gu Fei enjoy the baptism of lightning. The fixed body technique that Yang had cast on him had already been broken when the first bolt of lightning struck him. There was no spell that could remain unbroken under the bombardment of the power of lightning. As long as the power of lightning in the world was strong enough, it could break any spell. This was because the power of lightning represented the power of the world. The legendary god of thunder wielded the power to punish on behalf of the heavens. Of course, no one knew if the god of thunder existed in the world. However, what in the world could go against the heavens? Gu Fei did not know, but he knew very well that even a powerful immortal was just an ant in the face of the heavens. Powerful bolts of lightning were constantly guided down by the Kongming lantern in the sky and mercilessly struck into his body. Countless bolts of lightning passed through his flesh and bones before entering the ground beneath Gu Fei's feet. This was an inhumane torture. Even though Gu Fei's body had been tempered 100 times, he still felt extreme pain, as though his skin was being fried and his bones were being torn apart. Every time he was struck by lightning, it was as though there were countless sharp swords slicing his body. It made him feel a terrible pain, as though his flesh and bones were being separated and torn apart. An ordinary person would definitely not be able to withstand such terrible torture. However, Gu Fei's willpower was incomparably firm. He would not easily succumb to any power, even if it was the power of the world. Every time a bolt of lightning struck down from the sky, Gu Fei could not wait to crush the jade talisman in his hand. However, in the end, he gritted his teeth and endured it. He gritted his teeth and endured the inhumane pain. Traces of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. The power of lightning in the world could repel all evils. It was the nemesis of the evil yin qi in his body. Moreover, with the power of heavenly lightning, although it was dangerous, it was very likely that an incomparably powerful heavenly lightning would descend and strike Gu Fei into charcoal. However, in the midst of danger, there were also opportunities. For Gu Fei, using the power of lightning to temper his body was not entirely a bad thing. The mysterious yin ghost qi that had invaded his bone marrow was gradually dispersed by the power of lightning that passed through his body. Gu Fei's miserable howls were earth-shattering. Endless vitality constantly healed his body that had been burned by the power of lightning. All the muscles in his body involuntarily twitched violently, releasing waves of vitality to nourish his injured body. The strong physique of a martial artist allowed Gu Fei to recover very quickly after being struck by lightning. Yang watched from the grassy slope for a long time. She thought that Gu Fei would not be able to endure the pain of being struck by lightning for long. He would crush the jade talisman and start all over again. However, she seemed to be wrong. 2 hours passed. 4 hours passed. Gu Fei's miserable howls were still coming from afar. His voice did not weaken at all. It was obvious that he could continue to endure it. In the Thunder Lake, black thunderclouds covered the land. It seemed as though they would never dissipate. There was no sunlight or stars in this place. There was thunder, but there was no rain. This was a strange place. It was a paradise for cultivators who cultivated lightning-based Dao techniques. However, even so, not many cultivators dared to go deep into the Thunder Lake. They could only walk around the periphery of the Thunder Lake like Jiu Fei and Yang Er. Forget it, let's return to the Pill Cauldron Paradise first. I wonder when he will crush the Jade Talisman. The lightning lake was filled with a heavy pressure that came from the heaven and earth, making Yang Er a little uncomfortable. Yang Er crushed the Jade Talisman in her hand. A ball of green light immediately spread out from her hand, enveloping her within. Shua. The void that was enveloped by the green light trembled, and ripples spread out like water waves. The light dimmed and then disappeared completely. Yang Er's figure had already disappeared along with the light. It was as though she had broken through the void. It was difficult to teleport out of the Pill Cauldron Paradise. However, one only needed to crush a Jade Talisman to return to the Pill Cauldron Paradise. Yang Er was not worried that Jiu Fei would be in danger. This was because even if he was in danger, Jiu Fei would not be so foolish as to not crush the Jade Talisman. It could be said that the Jade Talisman was actually a talisman. The Jade Talisman of the Pill Cauldron sect was very special. It was more convenient than the void-shifting scrolls that were sealed with spatial Dao techniques. The Dao technique scroll had to be unfolded to release the sealed Dao technique power. As for the Jade Talisman of the Pill Cauldron sect, one only needed to hold it in one's hand and crush it. The Dao technique power would explode in an instant and teleport the person to the Pill Cauldron Paradise. It had to be said that Jiu Fei's willpower was perversely strong. It seemed like there was no pain that he could not endure. He did not know how many times he had been struck by the power of lightning from the Kongming lantern. Jiu Fei felt as if he had become numb. The lightning energy washed over his body again and again, and the bone-chilling cold that would flare up several times a day gradually weakened. Under the baptism of lightning, his physical body and nerves were tempered to become stronger and more resilient. A day and a night passed. The place where Jiu Fei was had become a huge, charred pit that was steaming. It was as if a meteorite had fallen there, producing an incomparably strong heat that burned everything. The boulder had long been shattered. The area within a radius of several dozen zhong had become scorched earth. Only a metal chain that seemed to connect heaven and earth remained intact. Even after being struck by the power of lightning countless times, it seemed like it would not leave a single mark on this metal chain. He did not know when it started, but Jiu Fei felt that the cold in his body had stopped acting up. Therefore, he subconsciously began to accumulate the power of lightning. Although the power of lightning between heaven and earth was an incomparably tyrannical and destructive power, it was also one of the powers of heaven and earth. It could also be refined. Jiu Fei began to circulate his mysterious art to refine the power of lightning. This was definitely an incomparably crazy action because the power of lightning was extremely hard to tame. If he was not careful, the powerful power of lightning could burn him into ashes. However, Jiu Fei did not care so much. His cultivation had already reached the bottleneck of the third heavenly layer of the ascended realm. He wanted to borrow the power of lightning to break through his current bottleneck. He felt that this was an opportunity to break through his current bottleneck. He could not let it go. As he circulated his mysterious art, bolts of lightning began to surround Jiu Fei's body. These bolts of lightning did not dissipate. Instead, they were emitted from within his body. Under the baptism of lightning, his tendons, bones, and flesh gradually transformed and became stronger. Jiu Fei's physical body gradually improved under the destruction of the lightning. Bolts of lightning continuously struck down from the thunderclouds above his head. The power of lightning was gradually guided by Jiu Fei to every part of his body. Tiny snake-like currents flowed through his skin. Jiu Fei seemed to have turned into a spirit of lightning. His body emitted strong rays of light and thick arcs of lightning shot out from his orifices. As time passed, Jiu Fei's figure was gradually covered by the lightning that shot out from his body. Then, a huge ball of lightning with a radius of 1 zhong appeared in the huge pit, flickering with strong light. Shua. The teleportation array on the hill emitted a dazzling light. Strong waves of spiritual energy shook the void and ripples that could be seen by the naked eye spread out. When the light dissipated, a purple figure appeared in the teleportation array. Yang Er had come to the Thunder Lake from the Pill Cauldron Cave world. She walked out of the teleportation array and headed towards the direction of Jiu Fei. She waited in the Pill Cauldron Cave world for a day and night but did not see Jiu Fei return. Feeling worried, she came to the Thunder Lake again. The place where Jiu Fei was struck by lightning was easy to find because the power of lightning gathered there. The power of heaven and earth was very strong and could be sensed from far away. When Yang Er came closer, she was stunned by the scene in front of her. The Kongming lantern had already fallen into the swamp, and the lightning in the sky was still striking down from the thunderclouds. The sound of thunder and lightning was earth-shattering. In a huge pit, a huge ball of lightning formed by lightning had burnt the soil within a radius of tens of feet. The ground was scorched black. The lightning ball had a diameter of 2 to 3 feet and emitted a blinding light. What happened? Yang Er was shocked. She could feel that the ball of lightning was nurturing a strong force. A heart-palpitating aura was emitted from the ball of lightning. This fella. Yang Er was speechless for a long time. After she calmed herself down, she could vaguely guess what had happened. Jiu Fei was actually using the power of lightning to cultivate. This made Yang Er's jaw drop. Jiu Fei's actions were undoubtedly audacious. Yang Er did not leave. She stood guard nearby and paid close attention to the changes in the ball of lightning. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, 7 days had passed. During this period of time, a few strong beasts were alarmed and rushed over from other areas of the Thunder Lake. However, they were all chased away by Yang Er. The power nurturing in the ball of lightning was gradually increasing. The mighty aura emitted from the ball of lightning made the nearby beasts very uneasy. As for Jiu Fei, he was sitting in the ball of lightning with his legs crossed, enduring inhuman pain. Endless power of lightning was flowing in his body. It was as if thousands of swords were constantly penetrating through his flesh and bones, tempering his body over and over again. It was as if they were trying to forge his body into a treasure. Yang Er didn't know when Jiu Fei would stop cultivating. She sat with her legs crossed on a nearby grassy slope and quietly waited for Jiu Fei. She knew that not only had the evil qi in Jiu Fei's body been completely expelled, his cultivation base would also increase greatly after being tempered by the heavenly lightning. Bustling City, which stood in the north of northern Wei and was close to the abyss of immortals and demons, was definitely an ancient city. No one knew when Northern Mountain City was built. No one even knew how it appeared in the northern lands. There were many unimaginable myths and legends here. Such an ancient city standing in the border between the extreme northern demon region and the central plains would definitely arouse people's imagination. Although Bustling City wasn't as grand as the Dragon Emperor City in the southern wasteland, it was still a famous city in the northern region. In the evening, 2 young cultivators in white clothes appeared outside the city gate of Bustling City. With a cultivator's keen sense, they could sense an ancient and vicissitude aura. Bustling City was like an indomitable giant that stood in the snowy north, guarding the land of the north. Senior brother, isn't it a bit rash for us to choose this place as our first stop for training? A handsome young cultivator with the appearance of a pillously beautiful woman asked. This young cultivator was like a beautiful woman dressed in men's clothing. His skin was so delicate that even women would be jealous of him. He was a young cultivator with the appearance of a girl. The other cultivator standing beside the young cultivator had an ordinary appearance. He was thin and had tanned skin. He looked like a farmer in the countryside who went to work at sunrise and returned home at sunset. When the two of them walked together, one was so handsome that even women would be jealous of him, while the other had an ordinary appearance. This combination was a bit strange. What's there to be rash about? I heard that junior brother Dongfang Chen also came to the northern lands. The unassuming young cultivator said disapprovingly. Junior brother Dongfang? The handsome young cultivator couldn't help but reveal a strange smile. At this moment, 2 young cultivators in white clothes walked out of the city gate. The 2 of them looked similar. They both had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. They were definitely rare handsome men. However, the 2 of them had a masculine aura that was unique to men, while the young man with the unassuming young cultivator had a feminine aura. Speak of the devil and he will arrive. The handsome young cultivator couldn't help but be surprised when he saw the two young cultivators coming out of the city. He. Senior brother Lee, senior brother Zu, please forgive me for being late to welcome you. Two young cultivators came out of the city. One of them walked up to the two cultivators outside the city gate. Hey. Junior brother Dongfang, your cultivation. The dark-skinned young cultivator with an ordinary appearance looked at the young cultivator who came to greet him. His eyes flashed with a strange light. Little brother is stupid. It's been more than a year since I returned to the Dongfang family, but I still haven't broken through my current bottleneck. Sigh. Dongfang Chen's expression was a bit depressed and lost. The two cultivators in white outside the city gate were Li Lingfeng and Ziyu, who were walking down the mountain. The two young men in white who came out of the city were the two brothers, Dongfang Chen and Dongfang Long. However, there was no sign of Beitang Ao. Dongfang Chen had found an excuse to return to the Dongfang family more than a year ago. He did this to see if he could break through his current cultivation bottleneck with the help of the family. Secondly, he was preparing to deal with Ji Yufei. In the Supreme Mystery Sect, there was the existence of Wang Yuanji and other spies. What happened in the sect, Dongfang Chen knew like the palm of his hand. When he learned that the sect had sent Minister Dan with the primordial spirit lamp down the mountain to look for Ji Yufei, it was difficult for Dongfang Chen to stay in the Dongfang family to cultivate. Junior brother Dongfang, you're really well informed. There don't seem to be many people who know that senior brother Li and I have come to the north. Ziyu looked at Dongfang Chen meaningfully and said indifferently. First publication of this book. Chapter 341. The people of the three great Daoist sects began to appear in the north. Not only the three great Daoist sects, but other cultivation forces also had disciples enter the north. Some of the old monsters were also alarmed. The first son of the demon lord, Chu Ji, was wreaking havoc in the north. In the world of cultivation, there was probably no force that would not be nervous. Moreover, there was the new spiritual land. The true experts of the Tinglong continent attached great importance to the new spiritual land. Even the old monsters who had not been involved in the affairs of the world for a long time came out. The demons were the enemies of all the cultivators in the world, and a spiritual land was even more attractive. With these two factors, it would be strange if the northern lands didn't attract the attention of others. The people of the Supreme Mystery Sect did not have a fixed place to stay in Biling City. The Dongfang family booked the entire Yunlai Inn. Dongfang Chen took Li Lingfeng and Ziyu to the inn and arranged two of the best rooms for them. Dongfang Chen and Dongfang Long, Li Lingfeng, and Ziyu only had a brief conversation in the room before the Dongfang brothers left. In Li Lingfeng's room, Li Lingfeng and Ziyu sat down at the table. Senior brother, why is junior brother Dongfang so enthusiastic about entertaining us? Is there something fishy about this? Ziyu said to Li Lingfeng. He did not hide his doubts. Li Lingfeng pondered for a moment, then said, there are not many people who know that we came down the mountain, and even fewer people who know that we came to the north. How does junior brother Dongfang know our whereabouts? In the Supreme Mystery Sect, as long as a disciple broke through to the realm of transcending mortality, they were qualified to go down the mountain and walk in the world of cultivation, gaining experience in the world of mortals. Li Lingfeng and Ziyu were the best of the younger generation of the Supreme Mystery Sect. In the past few years, they had successfully taken that step with the help of the core condensation pill. Cultivators who broke through to the realm of transcending mortality had a qualitative improvement in their lifespan and cultivation. Cultivators who had reached this realm could be considered to stand out among the thousands of people in the world and step onto the path of the strong. Cultivators could condense their power, form their core, and cleanse their marrow. After forming their core, cultivators would be transparent inside and out, and they would be reborn. They would communicate with heaven and earth, and use the surplus of the world to make up for their own deficiencies. They would use their strengths to make up for their weaknesses, steal the sky, and begin to derive power. Network, there seems to be something strange about junior brother Dongfang. Ziyu's expression became serious. En. Li Lingfeng nodded and said, let's wait and see for now. Let's see what junior brother Dongfang is planning. Li Lingfeng and Zi Yu were both smart people. The other party seemed to know their whereabouts like the back of his hand. They were already on guard. However, Dongfang Chen's actions made them very puzzled. At this time, in another room in the inn, Dongfang Chen and Dongfang Long were also talking in secret. Second brother, why did you let Li Lingfeng and the others know that you were in Biling City? Dongfang Long, who always had his saber by his side, immediately asked after he sat down. Dongfang Chen smiled and said, I want them to know that I'm not only in Biling City, but I also revealed something to them. What happened? When Dongfang Long heard this, he couldn't help but be puzzled. He had been with Dongfang Chen all this time, but he didn't see his second brother reveal anything to Li Lingfeng. Do you really think I'm just going to welcome them? Dongfang Chen paused for a moment, then said, I'm just doing this to let them know that their whereabouts are all under my control. This. Dongfang Long seemed to have vaguely guessed his second brother's intentions. He couldn't help but shake his head. His second brother didn't play according to common sense. In this way, even if Li Lingfeng and Zi Yu originally had any plans, it would have been disrupted by Dongfang Chen's sudden move. Time passed quickly. 7 days had passed. In the Thunder Lake, dark clouds still hung over the sky, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. Roar. Suddenly, somewhere in the outskirts of the Thunder Lake, an earth-shattering roar rang out. The sound was so loud that even the thunder in the sky was overshadowed in an instant. The rolling sound waves echoed between the heavens and the earth. Then, countless dazzling lightning burst out from the place where the roar came from. Endless lightning shrouded this part of the world. Network, rumble, silver snakes danced chaotically between the heavens and the earth. Thunder exploded, causing the sky and the void to tremble. The grass within a radius of several hundred zhong was all scorched by the exploding lightning. That roar was still echoing between the heavens and the earth. The sudden explosion of lightning that covered several hundred zhong of the void suddenly shrank back. Thousands of lightning bolts all sank into a figure. Dazzling electric currents flowed up and down this person's body. In the next moment, this person seemed to have turned into a huge bolt of lightning and shot into the sky. Ha ha! I've finally broken through. That person directly leaped into the sky and laughed wildly. As he waved his hand, bolts of lightning as thick as a child's arm immediately rushed out, tearing through the void and shooting out dozens of zhong before dissipating in the void. 5 elements sword domain, open. That person separated his hands. Hum. A crisp sound of a sword soared into the 9 heavens. A powerful sword chi seeped out from his body and rushed straight into the sky. Amidst the 5-colored light, 5 different colored sword shadows appeared. Each sword shadow exuded a frightening wave of sword chi, forming 5 different colored void worlds. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth. It was as if 5 hazy worlds of swords were revolving around that person. This was not a single sword domain, but 5 sword domains. Each domain enveloped an area of the void, and this person was in the center of the 5 voids. It was as if he controlled the 5 worlds of swords. Within the 5 hazy small domains, one could see bolts of lightning flashing from time to time. The power of the 5 elements carried a trace of the power of thunder and lightning. His figure slowly descended. When he landed on the ground, 5 unparalleled sword chi shot out from the 5 void worlds. They stretched for hundreds of zhong and left 5 terrifying sword marks on the grass. Clap clap. A series of claps came from afar. A beautiful girl dressed in purple slowly walked over from afar. It looked like she was taking a leisurely stroll, but in just a few steps, the fairy-like, otherworldly girl had already arrived in front of that person. Old Gu, congratulations. The girl in purple's voice was crisp and sweet. Thank you. That person only said this one sentence, and with a crack, the sound of something suddenly breaking came from that person's hand. Then, a ball of green light burst out from that person's hand and instantly enveloped that person. The void cracked and shook, and the next moment, the dazzling green light instantly disappeared into the void. That person also disappeared with the dissipation of the green light. This guy runs really fast. The girl in purple couldn't help but be stunned. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and her face flushed red. She then crushed a jade talisman in her hand and a ball of green light enveloped her. Then, the green light disappeared with a flash and the girl in purple's figure also disappeared into thin air. In the Pill Cauldron Grotto heaven, the sun was setting in the west. Ji Fei sat cross-legged on the peak of the spiritual mountain. After cultivating in the lightning lake for more than 10 days, not only did the Xianyin ghost qi in Ji Fei's body dissipate, it also allowed Ji Fei's cultivation to reach a new level. Not only did the baptism of lightning strengthen his body, it was also a form of training for his state of mind. His divine sense had become much more condensed and his spiritual sense had become stronger. He had successfully broken through the barrier of cultivation and his cultivation had broken through from the 3rd heavenly stage to the 4th heavenly stage of the ascended realm. Especially the cultivation of his mental energy, it gave him a completely different feeling than before. Of course, the tempering of his body was something ordinary people couldn't imagine. The power of lightning was like a sharp blade that continuously attacked his flesh and bones. The power of lightning was destroying Ji Fei's body, but the huge amount of life energy within his body was healing Ji Fei's injuries. Destruction, rebirth, destruction, rebirth. This cycle repeated endlessly. It was like a piece of divine metal that had been tempered thousands of times, getting rid of the impurities and leaving behind the essence. His flesh, tendons, and bones became more condensed and resilient. It was as though his body had truly undergone a rebirth. Ji Fei's fleshly body was advancing towards the imperishable realm. If he could continue cultivating like this, Ji Fei's body would become a true physical treasure. If he could cultivate it to the extreme, not to mention divine weapons, he wouldn't even be at a disadvantage against legendary divine weapons or saint weapons. This wasn't an exaggeration. The continuous transformation of his body would eventually be refined by Ji Fei into an incomparably powerful undying warrior body. At that time, he would become an invincible cultivator. Ji Fei believed that with his current strength, he would have a high chance of winning if he met a cultivator at the 8th sky of the ascended realm. The baptism of lightning had elevated his mental and physical body. Even if he was at the 4th sky of the ascended realm, he would be able to fight against cultivators at the 8th sky of the ascended realm. Ordinary cultivators at the same level wouldn't be his opponent. Of course, there was no lack of geniuses in this world. Some people couldn't be measured by common sense. Yang for example, had already reached the peak of the 9th sky of the ascended realm at such a young age. There were definitely many geniuses like Yang in the cultivation world. An opponent like this would be a terrifying opponent. Ji Fei knew that he still had a long way to go. After the ascended realm, there was still the void controlling realm, demigod realm, and entering saint realm. If he wanted to break through the barrier of life and death, he still had to pass through many heavenly moats. The Pill Cauldron Paradise was a mysterious place. Here, there were sunrises and sunsets, day and night, stars and the moon. This wasn't a projection, nor was it an illusion. All of this was real. The grand array around the Pill Cauldron Paradise isolated this part of the world from the outside world. It was difficult for the people outside to sense the existence of the Pill Cauldron Paradise, but the people inside the Pill Cauldron Paradise could see the sunrise and sunset. One had to admit that the methods of the ancestors of the Pill Cauldron school were too unimaginable. This was simply a divine ability that could move mountains and overturn seas. When night fell and the stars started to appear in the sky, Ji Fei stood up from the peak of the mountain and walked down the mountain, disappearing into the grass and trees. The profound yin ghost qi in his body was expelled by the power of the heavenly lightning. Not only did his cultivation recover, it was also a blessing in disguise. He broke through to the 4th sky of the ascended realm. Ji Fei couldn't sit still anymore. If he didn't take revenge, then he wouldn't be a gentleman. Furthermore, Ji Fei knew that he wasn't a gentleman. He was a person who would repay kindness and vengeance without hesitation. On a morning 3 days later, Ji Fei appeared outside the gates of the northern mountain city. Of course, he didn't appear with his real face. With his current cultivation, he could control the muscles and bones in his body and change his appearance. It wasn't a piece of cake, it was as easy as flipping his palm. Book. Chapter 342. After changing his appearance, Ji Yufei had turned into a skinny, unprepossessing swordsman who wore a grayish-white robe and carried an ancient sword on his back. He had asked Yang for this ancient sword. The style of the ancient sword was simple and unadorned, and the scabbard was engraved with ancient patterns. Although it was not a divine weapon, it was still a rare long sword. Ji Yufei had suppressed his cultivation base to the 9th heavenly layer of awakening realm. Judging from the aura that Ji Yufei exuded, it would be difficult to tell his true cultivation base if one was not a peerless expert of the void-controlling realm. After changing his appearance, Ji Yufei was not afraid of being discovered by the people of the Dongfang clan. He swaggered into Biling City. The streets of Biling City were not deserted in the early morning. The energy of cultivators was much more vigorous than that of ordinary people. Cultivators could be seen everywhere on the streets. Ji Yufei noticed that there were no truly powerful experts among the cultivators. They were all very young and seemed to be the younger generation who had left the mountain to gain experience. Although Taoism was particular about tranquility and inaction, leaving the mountain to walk the Tao and enter the world to cultivate was also indispensable. It was difficult for cultivators who had not experienced wind and rain to become truly strong. The doors of the shops on both sides of the street opened one after another. The shopkeepers and workers were busy with their work. Many of them placed their goods in front of the doors to attract customers. Ji Yufei went straight to the front of a restaurant. There were already many people dining inside. Looking in from the door, he saw that most of the people dining in the lobby were ordinary people. The restaurant only had 3 floors. Ji Yufei walked into the restaurant and found that although the restaurant was not big, the interior was decorated in an antique style. When Ji Yufei walked into the restaurant, a worker with a towel on his shoulder immediately came to greet him. The worker quickly sized up Ji Yufei. When he saw the ancient sword on Ji Yufei's back, he immediately became unusually respectful. "Sir, this way please." The shop assistant seemed a little nervous. He directly led Ji Yufei to the stairs. When they reached the 2nd floor, the shop assistant did not stop and continued to the 3rd floor. Although Ji Yufei was surprised by the waiter's attitude and behavior, he did not think too much about it. As he passed by the 2nd floor, he glanced at the lobby and realized that there were already cultivators among the people dining on the 2nd floor. The lobby on the 1st floor was very noisy because it was a place for mortals to eat, but the 2nd floor was relatively quiet. On the 3rd floor, the waiter directly led Ji Yufei to a private room. On the 3rd floor, there were no ordinary people. There were only a few cultivators eating. The food of the cultivators was usually very simple. There was no big fish or meat, not even any fishy meat. Most of the cultivators' tables were filled with fruits and tea. Cultivators were humans too. They also needed to eat and drink. Ji Yufei casually ordered a few dishes and the waiter left. The private room of the restaurant was very quiet. Ji Yufei had already vaguely guessed why the waiter directly brought him to the 3rd floor. Cultivators usually liked peace and quiet. It seemed that the waiter had served many cultivators before. Therefore, he knew how to treat these cultivators. Soon, the dishes were served. Ji Yufei began to drink by himself in the private room. His master, Wn Xiancheng, liked to drink a few cups when he was alive. Like master, like disciple. This saying was true. Whenever Ji Yufei went to a place like a restaurant, he also liked to drink by himself. Although he was in the private room, he noticed that other than the cultivators in the lobby, there were also a few subtle waves of energy coming from the other private rooms. Ever since Ji Yufei's cultivation broke through to the 4th layer of the ascended mortality realm, his vision, hearing, smell, and perception had all greatly improved. He felt that among the cultivators on the 3rd floor, there were no experts that could truly threaten him. It was no wonder that such a big shot would appear in such a small restaurant. "Brother Chen, do you know why the people from the 3 great Daoist sects came to the northern lands?" Suddenly, a sentence from the private room next door caught Ji Yufei's attention. "I don't know. I just came to the northern lands to have some fun. Does Brother Song know the reason?" Another voice came from the private room next door. "Hihi, of course I know." The cultivator with the surname Chen said with some pride. "Hurry up and tell me. The cultivator with the surname Song hurriedly asked. Although the two cultivators in the private room next door spoke in low voices, every word they said fell clearly into Ji Yufei's ears. From the sound of their voices, the two cultivators in the private room next door shouldn't be too old. From the aura they emitted, their cultivation seemed to be between the 8th and 9th layer of the awakening self-realm. Yes. A few days ago, I met a distant cousin of mine that I haven't seen for many years. My cousin is a disciple of the Shongqing sect. The cultivator with the surname Chen said. I didn't expect you to have a relative in the Shongqing sect. It's not that easy to enter the three great Daoist sects. The cultivator with the surname Song said enviously. The people from the three great Daoist sects didn't come to the northern lands for the rumored spiritual land or the great demon Chu Ji. The cultivator with the surname Chen said mysteriously. No way. Then why did they come? The cultivator with the surname Song said in shock. After all, the news of the demon lord's son wreaking havoc in the northern lands and the rumor that the northern lands had discovered a spiritual land had already spread like wildfire in northern Mountain City. The cultivator with the surname Chen chuckled. He seemed to want to whet the appetite of the cultivator with the surname Song. Hurry up and tell me. The cultivator with the surname Song said anxiously. The cultivator with the surname Chen said, you wouldn't believe me even if I told you. The reason the people from the three great Daoist sects came to the northern lands is to find someone. Find someone? Who is it that the three great Daoist sects sent out experts to look for them? I heard that someone saw Daoist Chaoyang of the Supreme Mystery sect in the city. The cultivator with the surname Song seemed to be very surprised. It wasn't just the cultivator with the surname Song. Ji Yufei, who had been quietly listening to the conversation in the room next door, was also shocked. He had already vaguely guessed who the three great Daoist sects were looking for. Who would have thought? The people from the three great Daoist sects were all here for me. After hearing this, Ji Yufei was no longer in the mood to listen. The words of the cultivator with the surname Chen shocked him. Daoist Chaoyang was the head of the Shaoyang Peak and one of the most powerful people in the Supreme Mystery sect. Ji Yufei was very confused. It made sense that the Supreme Mystery sect would come looking for him. After all, he was a disciple of the Supreme Mystery sect and the only successor of the Ling Kui Peak. If he died, the Ling Kui Peak would be lost. The sect leader, Daoist Shentian, would definitely not want to see the Ling Kui Peak go extinct. Daoist Shentian wanted to maintain the legacy of the 9 great branches of the Supreme Mystery sect. But why did the Shongqing sect and the Guangqing Celestial sect come to the northern lands to find him? Ji Yufei couldn't figure it out, and there was no one to answer his questions. However, the words of these two people couldn't be trusted. This kind of rumor was full of uncertainty. Perhaps it was just groundless rumors. I have to find a way to verify it. Ji Yufei thought to himself. He was not an impulsive person. He had to plan before he acted. Only then could he minimize the danger he was in. As Ji Yufei thought of this, he walked out of the room, paid the bill, and left the small restaurant. He didn't have any currency in the secular world, but that didn't mean he was going to dine and dash. The way he paid the bill was actually very simple. He threw a gem to the restaurant manager. When Ji Yufei came out of the Pill Cauldron Grotto Heaven, he conveniently picked up a few gems and carried them with him. With those gems, not to mention a meal, they could even buy the entire small restaurant. Encountering such a forthright customer, the innkeeper of the restaurant was overjoyed. As long as he encountered a few more generous customers like Ji Yufei, he would be able to enjoy his old age in advance. After leaving the restaurant, Ji Yufei realized that he was being watched. Ji Yufei sneered, then quietly wandered the streets, looking here and there. It was like this was the first time he had traveled far away, and he didn't know anything about the outside world. He realized that behind him, there really were two people following him. There were two people far behind him. Ji Yufei couldn't help but feel a little strange. Logically speaking, the people from the Dongfang and Beitang families shouldn't have noticed his traces. He had already changed his appearance. Even if Dongfang Chen and Beitang Ao stood in front of him, they probably wouldn't be able to recognize him. Who are they? Ji Fei couldn't help but be a little curious. He pretended not to notice anything and slowly walked in the direction of the city gate. At this time, it was already late in the morning. The streets of the city were crowded with people, shouting and hawking incessantly. There were even cultivators in 2s and 3s appearing on the streets. The secular world was so fresh to those cultivators who cultivated in the mountains or sects all year round. Of course, the novelty of the secular world for Ji Fei had long since disappeared. Ji Fei walked out of Beiling City without batting an eyelid. The two men were still following him from a distance. After leaving Beiling City, Ji Fei gradually went further and further away. Then, he turned into a small path next to the main road and walked into the snow forest. In the snow forest, all that could be seen was snow. The leaves of the trees had long fallen off, and on the bare branches, one could see crystalline icicles hanging down. The two people following behind Ji Fei were two young men in grey robes. They followed Ji Fei into the snow forest and continued to follow Ji Fei for a while. Suddenly, one of the two young men rushed into the snow forest next to the small path, while the other continued to follow behind Ji Fei. Soon, the person who rushed into the snow forest took a shortcut and ran in front of Ji Fei. Then, he suddenly rushed out of the snow forest and blocked Ji Fei's path. Ji Fei stopped. He couldn't help feeling a little amused. He was well aware of the actions of these two fellows. Could it be that these two fellows wanted to rob him? Kid, if you know what's good for you, then leave that treasured sword on you. Perhaps we can spare your life. The young man who blocked Ji Fei's path approached Ji Fei step by step. He was tall and thin, and his face was sallow. He looked like a patient who had been ill for a long time. However, Ji Fei sensed a powerful wave of magic power from this patient that did not match the patient's appearance. When Ji Fei heard this, he realized that these two people had their eyes on the ancient sword on his back. Chapter 343. In a remote snow forest outside Beiling City, Ji Fei was blocked by two young cultivators who were tailing him on a small path in the forest. "Brother, we don't want to take your life. Put down that sword and you can go," said a dark-skinned, sturdy young man from behind Ji Fei. The man was not tall, but he was extremely strong. The aura he exuded was like that of a ferocious tiger. His skin was visible, and his muscles were as strong as a horned dragon's. "Hehe, you want my sword? Come and take it if you can," Ji Fei said with a smile. The cultivation of these two fellows was not high. They seemed to be in the 8th or 9th heaven of the awakening state. Perhaps it was because these two fellows thought that Ji Fei's cultivation was on par with theirs, and there were two of them. They dared to block the path and ask for Ji Fei's sword. "Me. Boss, don't talk to this kid. Since he wants to die, let's fulfill his wish." The tall, thin, and sallow young man who seemed to have just recovered from a serious illness seemed to be a little impatient. When Ji Fei heard this, he reached out and untied the ancient sword on his back. Then, he stabbed it into the snow in front of him together with its scabbard and said coldly, "My sword is here." Seeing how calm Ji Fei was, the two young cultivators did not dare to act rashly. They could already tell that Ji Fei did not seem to care about them at all. It should be known that a sword cultivator's abilities were all in the sword in their hands. When Ji Fei stabbed the sword into the ground, he had already revealed a message to the two young cultivators. That was, he did not need to draw his sword to deal with them. "Kid, you're very arrogant. Let me see if you have the ability to be arrogant." As the sturdy young man behind Ji Fei spoke, his figure suddenly sank. His feet pushed against the ground, and the snow under his feet immediately exploded. At the same time, his body seemed to have turned into a ferocious tiger as he pounced at Ji Fei. A strong wind surged and swept the snow on the ground into the air. "Hey!" When Ji Fei saw this scene, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. This young man's pounce was very similar to the close combat technique that he had learned from Xiong Hu. Ji Fei did not dodge or evade. His feet were firmly nailed to the ground like the roots of an old tree. In the face of the young man's ferocious attack that was like a ferocious tiger pouncing on its prey, he only met it with a punch. It was an ordinary punch. There was no dazzling light, no powerful energy fluctuations, and no intense airwaves. It was just a casual punch. However, this punch possessed the power to turn something rotten into something magical. Ji Yufei's fist rapidly enlarged in the young man's eyes. Then, the young man, who was like a fierce tiger, only felt his vision go black. Bang! A sharp pain came from the bridge of his nose, and he seemed to hear the sound of bones breaking. The young man was depressed to the extreme. The moment he was punched, he had a strange feeling. It was as if his face was facing the opponent's fist, and he was being punched in the face. This young cultivator came quickly, but he also left quickly. He was blown away by Ji Yufei's casual punch, and a few bloody teeth flew out of his mouth. Bang! The young cultivator smashed into a big tree more than 10 feet away. His body bounced back and then smashed into the snow under the tree. Shaw! A pile of snow fell on the big tree. The tall and thin young man in front of him was immediately stunned. His eyes were wide open, and his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. It was really hard to believe that his boss was actually blown away by a punch. A layer of sweat appeared on the tall and thin young man's forehead. It was cold sweat. Although he was in a world of ice and snow, the tall and thin young man could feel that his underwear was already soaked in cold sweat. Impossible, my eyes are playing tricks on me. The tall and thin young man rubbed his eyes hard. His boss was blown away inexplicably. The scene that just happened was really hard for him to accept. Why, do you still want my sword? Ji Yufei crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at the tall and thin young man in front of him with a faint smile. He said as if nothing had happened. How did you do it just now? The tall and thin young man's sallow face became even more yellow. This guy in front of him didn't seem to be simple. The sturdy young man was blown away by Ji Yufei's punch and smashed into the snow. There was no more sound from him. It was unknown if he was knocked out by Ji Yufei's punch or if he was killed. Ji Yufei smiled and then said, "What you see with your eyes is not necessarily true. What you sense with your spiritual sense may also be fake. Do you think that my cultivation is only at this level? That is really a big mistake." The tall and thin yellow-faced young man finally realized that this guy in front of him was a tiger pretending to be a pig. "What do you want?" the yellow-faced young man said with a trembling voice. He was already ready to escape at any time. "I don't want anything, I just want to ask you a few things," Ji Yufei said. With the cultivation of these two young cultivators, he disdained to take action. The tall and thin yellow-faced cultivator seemed to have a chance to turn the situation around. He immediately sighed in relief and said, "Ask away, I will tell you everything I know." "Very good." Ji Yufei couldn't help but secretly nod his head. This guy was not stupid and could judge the situation. Such people often lived longer than others. "Why do you want to take my sword?" Ji Yufei didn't beat around the bush and directly asked. The yellow-faced young man hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he didn't dare to hide it and said the reason. We brothers recently obtained a sword scripture and wanted to cultivate it, but we lacked a good sword. So that's how it is." Ji Yufei thought that these two must be vagrant cultivators or disciples of some small sect. They lacked cultivation resources and couldn't even find a good sword. "Where are the Dongfang and Beitang families staying in the city?" Ji Yufei asked again. He had changed his appearance and entered the northern mountain city to find Dongfang Chen, Beitang Ao, and the others to settle the score. He was not interested in the sword scripture that the yellow-faced young man was talking about. When the sallow-faced cultivator saw that Ji Yufei didn't pursue the matter of the sword manual, he inwardly let out a sigh of relief. He was very straightforward and said without thinking, "The Dongfang clan has booked a large inn in the city called Guest Cloud. As for the Beitang clan, they seem to be staying at the City Lord's mansion." Guest Cloud, City Lord's mansion? Ji Yufei couldn't help but frown, then he continued to ask, "How many of them came?" "I don't know how many of them came," the yellow-faced young man said. With his identity, he wasn't qualified to know the movements of the two families. "Yes." Ji Yufei pondered for a moment, then asked, "I know that the people of the Supreme Mystery Sect have also arrived at Beeling City. Where are they staying?" The yellow-faced young cultivator heard this, and his face immediately showed a look of embarrassment. He said, "The people of the three great Tao sects are very secretive. I don't know where the people of the Supreme Mystery sect are." This guy didn't know anything, which made Ji Yufei a little unhappy. However, with this guy's cultivation level, how much could he know? It was already rare for him to know where the people of the Dongfang and Beitang families were staying. "Okay, you can go." Ji Yufei waved his hand. He didn't want to ask anymore. The things this guy knew were very limited. The yellow-faced young cultivator was immediately overjoyed. He ran to his boss, who had been sent flying by Ji Yufei, and smashed into a pile of snow. He hurriedly carried his boss out of the snow and quickly left. The people of the Dongfang family are at the inn, but the people of the Beitang family are at the city lord's mansion. The city lord of Beiling City is definitely not a simple person, Ji Yufei muttered to himself. After thinking for a moment, he pulled out the ancient sword that was stuck in the snow in front of him and walked out of the snow forest. He decided to meet the people of the Dongfang family first. After returning to Beiling City, Ji Yufei didn't know where the inn called Guest Cloud was located, so he asked the passers-by. There was no resident in the city who didn't know the Guest Cloud Inn because it was one of the largest, best, and most luxurious inns in Beiling City. After asking the passers-by, Ji Yufei found out where the Guest Cloud Inn was. The Guest Cloud Inn was located in the prosperous area south of Beiling City. Very soon, Ji Yufei arrived at the south of the city and found the Guest Cloud Inn. He was not in a hurry. After looking around, he found that there was a tea house opposite the Guest Cloud Arrival Inn. He walked into the tea house and found a seat facing the street to sit down. He ordered a pot of fragrant tea and sipped it while paying attention to the movements in the inn opposite. He noticed that there weren't many people going in and out of the inn. Moreover, some cultivators who wanted to enter the inn were stopped by a few young cultivators in white robes. It seemed that only the disciples of the Dongfang family could enter. The Dongfang family's display of dominance was bound to cause dissatisfaction among the other cultivators. As expected, sounds of quarreling could be heard from outside the inn opposite. 3 or 4 young cultivators in green robes were arguing with the 2 disciples of the Dongfang family outside the inn. "Others might be afraid of the Dongfang family, but we of Floating City aren't. You 2 watchdogs, get out of my way," the leading cultivator in green robes shouted. He seemed to want to attract the attention of the bystanders, so he deliberately raised his voice. Sure enough, the gazes of the nearby cultivators were immediately drawn to him. "Floating City?" When Ji Yufei heard this, he couldn't help but be startled. He knew that this floating city seemed to be a mysterious force in the Tanglong continent. Just like the ghost palace of Plentiful City, ordinary people didn't even know where Floating City was. The people of Floating City seemed to rarely move about in the world of cultivation. "I didn't think that even the people of Floating City would come to the north," Ji Yufei thought to himself. He watched this scene with interest. He couldn't wait for someone to cause trouble for the Dongfang family. "What did you say? Say it again if you have the guts." The 2 disciples of the Dongfang family were obviously enraged by the words of the leading cultivator in green robes. One of the disciples pointed at the cultivator in green robes and shouted, looking like he would attack if there was any disagreement. "What, are your dogs deaf? Can't hear?" "That's right, how can watchdogs understand human language?" The leading cultivator in green robes said with a face full of disdain. "Raw. You're courting death." The disciple of the Dongfang family was completely infuriated. He stretched out his right hand and a cold light immediately rushed out, strangling the neck of the cultivator in green robes in front of him. Chapter 344. The people of Floating City rarely ventured into the world of cultivation. The 2 disciples of the Dongfang family outside the inn had no idea who the other party was. The words of the cultivator in green who had a dispute with the Dongfang family members were too harsh, completely infuriating the 2 disciples of the Dongfang family. One of the disciples from the Dongfang family directly attacked. With a wave of his hand, a cold light shot out towards the leading young cultivator. A chilling aura immediately filled the air outside the door of the inn. The green-robed cultivator sneered. He was not afraid of the sharpness of the blade and immediately punched the incoming cold light away. His fist did not stop there, and in the blink of an eye, he was right in front of the Dongfang family disciple. Bam! His fist landed squarely on the disciple's chest. Crack! The bone-chilling sound of bones breaking could be heard. The disciple spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. He fell directly into the inn behind. A series of chaotic sounds immediately came from inside the inn. It was obvious that the disciple of the Dongfang family who was sent flying had knocked over many tables. Hiss! The surrounding cultivators could not help but suck in a breath of cold air when they saw this scene. This person was truly audacious. He actually dared to directly attack and injure a disciple of the Dongfang family in their territory. One had to know that ever since the Dongfang family booked this inn, many cultivators had come looking for trouble, but all of them had been driven away by the Dongfang family. Could this young cultivator who claimed to be from Floating City be an exception? After hearing the news, more and more cultivators gathered there. Ji Yufei, on the other hand, continued to sit quietly in the tea shop across the street, watching the scene with an expressionless face. After beating up the young, the old comes out. The experts of the Dongfang family should be coming out soon. Ji Yufei thought to himself. He could use this opportunity to understand the situation of the Dongfang family. In fact, if it were not for the people of Floating City, Ji Yufei would have personally tested the waters. He had a few jade talismans that he had asked for from Yang Er. As long as he crushed the jade talismans, he could instantly return to Pill Cauldron Paradise. It could be said that Ji Yufei was not worried about encountering any danger because he had a life-saving talisman. Despicable. You dare wound a member of our Dongfang family? Do you know the consequences of offending our Dongfang family? Another disciple of the Dongfang family shouted at the cyan-robed cultivator with a fierce tone. Why wouldn't I? So what if I offended him? The azure-robed cultivator suddenly revealed an evil smile. Then, without any warning, he appeared in front of the disciple and sent him flying with a punch. All right. I'd like to see who dares to look down on my Dongfang family. At this time, a powerful energy fluctuation suddenly came from the inn. A man strode out of the inn. He stretched out his hand and caught the disciple who was sent flying. He then placed the disciple to the side. Immediately, someone helped the two disciples who were injured by the azure-robed cultivator away. The person who came out of the inn was a handsome young man in white robes. He didn't hide his anger and directly walked in front of the azure-robed cultivator. The azure-robed cultivators still didn't care. They coldly looked at the white-robed young man who walked out of the inn with disdainful expressions. These people's expressions made the white-robed young man even more unhappy. Who are you people? The white-robed young man said in a deep voice. A powerful aura burst out from his body. His clothes and hair fluttered without any wind. The cultivators who were watching from afar immediately felt a heavy pressure. Those with lower cultivations already felt uncomfortable, as if a huge rock was pressing down on their hearts. The white-robed young man who walked out of the inn was actually a young man in the transcending mortality realm. The surrounding cultivators couldn't help but be shocked. Old Lee, has it been too long since the people of Floating City came out? It's been so long that the world doesn't even know of our existence. The azure-robed cultivator in the lead ignored the white-robed young man and asked another azure-robed cultivator beside him. The azure-robed cultivator called Old Lee chuckled and said with disdain, "It seems that we need to come out more often." Yes. The feeling of being forgotten makes me very unhappy. The other azure-robed cultivator nodded. Floating City? The white-robed young man from the Dongfang family couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Why would the people of Floating City target our Dongfang family? The white-robed young man's expression couldn't help but become serious. The Floating City and the Valley of Fallen Souls were two very mysterious forces in the Tenglong continent. No one knew where they were located. Of course, no one was willing to provoke them either. So what if you're from the Floating City? If you don't want to die, then scram, the white-robed young man said in a deep voice. These people looked down on him, but how could he look down on them? The azure-robed cultivator in the lead couldn't help but change his expression. He coldly stared at the white-robed young man and said coldly, "Very well, it's your honor to die by the hands of I, Pan Hong." Swoosh. A few figures immediately dodged. This is also what I wanted to say. It's also your honor to die by the hands of I, Dongfang Yu. The white-robed young man said coldly. At this time, seeing that the situation wasn't right, the people around them immediately dispersed and retreated to the distance. Inside the inn, 3 or 4 young cultivators in the same white robes walked out one after another. These 3 or 4 white-robed cultivators each emitted a powerful aura. Without a doubt, these people were the experts of the younger generation of the Dongfang family. Ji Yufei noticed that Dongfang Chen's figure was among them. When he saw Dongfang Chen, Ji Yufei's pupils couldn't help but contract, and the teacup in his hand was crushed by him. Dongfang Chen. Ji Yufei almost couldn't suppress the rising anger in his heart, and his eyes gradually became red. He remembered all of Dongfang Chen's actions, especially the scene in the virtual sky world that day. Ji Yufei still remembered it vividly. Dongfang Chen almost trapped him to death in the virtual sky world. Ji Yufei had never hated a person so much, and he had never wanted to kill a person so much. That person was Dongfang Chen. Dongfang Chen, just you wait. I won't kill you so easily. Ji Yufei gnashed his teeth. He wanted revenge, ruthlessly revenge. Let's do it here, Pan Hong said. His expression also became serious. The strength of the Dongfang family couldn't be underestimated. Why not? Dongfang Yu shouted. As he spoke, he took a step forward and directly grabbed Pan Hong with his right hand. 5 divine lights shot out from the fingers of his right hand and pierced towards Pan Hong. Just an insignificant skill, Pan Hong said disdainfully. He then stretched out his right hand and gently pressed forward. A black light bloomed in his palm, like a black hole, and met the 5 dazzling lights. The 5 resplendent finger flashes collided with the black light that blossomed from Pan Hong's hand. A shocking scene occurred. The 5 finger flashes actually silently disappeared into the black light that was blocking the front. It was as if they had sunk into the void. Dongfang Yu only felt that his attack seemed to have no point of force. This feeling was like a punch with all his strength hitting the air. What kind of divine ability is this? Dongfang Yu was surprised. At this moment, the black light bloomed in Pan Hong's hand. After swallowing the 5 lights, it quickly spread out and shrouded Dongfang Yu. Pan Hong's face revealed a trace of disdain. This Dongfang Yu was not his opponent. He alone was enough to sweep away all the children of the Dongfang family present. This was not an exaggeration. This person from the Mist City did indeed have this strength. Ji Yufei only needed a single glance to know that the outcome was already decided. Dongfang Yu's cultivation was only around the 2nd heavenly layer of the ascended mortality realm, but Pan Hong's cultivation seemed to be between the 3rd and 4th heavenly layers. Sure enough, Dongfang Yu constantly shot out rays of dazzling lights. The magic power in his body surged violently. However, his divine light that seemed to be able to pierce through the void couldn't break through the black light curtain that enveloped Pan Hong. The rays of divine light that shot towards the black light curtain seemed to be devoured and disappeared without a sound. There wasn't even the slightest fluctuation. Anyone with a discerning eye could already tell that there was a great disparity between the two. Dongfang Yu was obviously not Pan Hong's opponent. Swish. The black light curtain that shrouded one side of the world suddenly accelerated and shrouded Dongfang Yu, trapping him in the black light curtain in an instant. At this moment, Dongfang Yu panicked. He desperately gathered his magic power and roared in anger, wanting to break through the black light curtain. However, after trying a few times, it didn't work. At this moment, the few youths of the Dongfang family standing outside the inn couldn't stand it anymore. A young man around the age of 27 or 28 made a move. He opened his mouth and spat out a ray of light. Within the ray of light was a small bronze bell. After the simple and unadorned bell rushed out of the young man's mouth, it instantly grew to the size of a small mountain. It flew above Pan Hong's head and covered his head. Trying to win with numbers. Suddenly, a disdainful sneer sounded from the side. Then, a green figure rushed over from the side. He jumped up and directly punched the bronze bell that was surrounded by rays of light. Dang! A loud sound rang out. The sound of the bell was deafening, shaking the heaven and earth. Ripples that could be seen with the naked eye spread out from the ancient bell. The ancient bronze bell was actually smashed apart by a single punch. The vast sound of the bell caused the ears of the spectating cultivators to ring. Some of the weaker cultivators were even shaken by the sound waves, causing the blood in their bodies to boil. Their faces turned pale and they hurriedly retreated further away. Chapter 345. The people of Misty City were powerful beyond compare. Pan Hong had trapped Dongfang Yu with unfathomable magical arts and divine abilities, but the performance of another young cultivator from Misty City was even more shocking. He had actually blasted away an ancient bronze bell the size of a small mountain. Amidst the deafening sound of the bell, the giant bronze bell was blasted directly towards the inn. The Dongfang family disciple who had attacked felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His figure swayed and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The ancient bronze bell was related to his aura. The ancient bell had suffered a great impact, and naturally, he was also shaken. He desperately wanted to call back his magical weapon, but the power of the punch from the floating city disciple was too great. For a moment, the giant bronze bell the size of a hill had actually escaped the control of the Dongfang family disciple. The ancient bronze bell was wreathed in multicolored light and emitted a vast power fluctuation. If it had hit the inn, it would definitely have destroyed the entire inn in an instant. The crowd of cultivators watching from afar could not help but exclaim. On the opposite street, Ji Yufei was still as calm as before. He knew that the real experts of the Dongfang family had not come out yet. If the young ones were beaten, the old ones would naturally jump out. Sure enough, just as the ancient bronze bell was about to hit the wall of the inn, there was a bang sound. The ancient bronze bell the size of a hill was blocked by an unfathomable power. It was as if the giant bell had hit an invisible wall, and ripples visible to the naked eye spread out. At this time, the young expert of the Dongfang family had already recovered. He hurriedly pointed at the ancient bronze bell, and the ancient bronze bell immediately flew back towards the young expert. The ancient bronze bell shrank as it flew towards the young expert of the Dongfang family. The young expert opened his mouth and swallowed it. It was obvious that this young expert of the Dongfang family was also a martial cultivator, and had already cultivated to the realm where he could store magical weapons into his body. The magical weapons of martial cultivators were originally condensed and nourished by their own essential essence and magical power day and night. Martial cultivators with profound cultivation generally had the means to store magical weapons into their bodies. Unlike Ji Yufei's weapon fusion refining technique, which could be fused into one's flesh, blood, and bones, the Dharma treasures that could be kept in one's body were not like those of Ji Yufei. Instead, one had to open up a place in one's body, and then wrap the Dharma treasures with one's Dharma powers and true essence at all times, refining them into natal Dharma treasures that were closely related to one's body. Mist City's disciples, Pan Hong and the others, couldn't help changing their expressions when they saw their ancient bronze bell being blocked. Clearly, an expert had secretly taken action. However, Pan Hong didn't stop because of this. The black light that enveloped Dongfang Yu was still shrinking, and no one could see Dongfang Yu's figure for a long time. The goal of Pan Hong and the others was very clear, and that was to establish their might. However, everyone could hear Dongfang Yu's exclamations and angry roars coming from the black light screen. The black light screen was very mystical. It seemed to be able to devour and block any kind of power. Dongfang Yu was enveloped by the black light screen that Pan Hong had shot out. He had no strength to fight back at all, and it looked like he would not be able to hold on much longer. The other young experts of the Dongfang family wanted to rescue Dongfang Yu, but those people from the Misty City were glaring at them like tigers watching their prey. Once they made a move, those people would definitely make a move as well. For a moment, both sides were in a stalemate, and no one dared to act blindly without thinking. At this moment, a cold snort that made people's hearts tremble rang out from the inn. A terrifying pressure immediately spread out from the inn, so heavy that it made it hard for everyone to breathe. A black-haired middle-aged man slowly walked out of the inn. This middle-aged man had a ruddy complexion and a head full of jet-black hair that draped neatly behind him. However, his eyes were filled with the vicissitudes of life, which clearly didn't match his age. The old one has come out. In the tea shop across the street, Gu Fei secretly sized up this middle-aged man. He inwardly speculated that this was definitely a terrifying expert. The middle-aged man's entire body emitted an obscure aura. However, this aura made people feel as if it was surging violently. It was as dignified as a mountain, and it was bottomless. Enough, the middle-aged man indifferently said, before casually waving his hand. The layer of black light that enveloped Dongfang Yu immediately shattered with a kai sound. Specks of black light and black threads dissipated in the air. With his technique broken, Pan Hong's figure swayed and he took a step back. His face was flushed red, as if he was drunk. Senior brother, the Misty City disciples couldn't help but be startled, and they all took a step forward. The black light screen exploded, revealing Dongfang Yu inside. He was already exhausted on the ground, and the ground around him was completely shattered, with cracks spreading in all directions. Greetings, ancestor. The Dongfang family disciples hurriedly bowed towards the middle-aged man with abnormal respect. I didn't think it would be an old monster. In the tea shop across the street, Gu Fei's heart trembled, and he inwardly rejoiced that he hadn't made a move. According to his original plan, if the Misty City disciples hadn't clashed with the Dongfang family disciples, he would have done the same thing as Pan Hong and the others. He would have gone up to look for trouble and test the Dongfang family's strength. The crowd of cultivators watching from afar also began to whisper. What kind of concept was ancestor? This middle-aged man was definitely a peerless expert that was rarely seen. Greetings, senior. Pan Hong and the other Misty City disciples also withdrew their arrogant attitudes and solemnly bowed towards the middle-aged man. In the world of cultivation, all cultivators only valued one thing, and that was strength. The weak would not be valued, and would even be looked down upon. However, the strong would receive everyone's respect. The people of Misty City finally couldn't bear the loneliness and want to come out into the world. The middle-aged man coldly said, emitting an invisible pressure that caused people's hearts to palpitate. Pan Hong's forehead was already covered in a layer of cold sweat. He didn't expect that there would be a peerless expert of the ancestor level in the inn. Senior must be joking. My Misty City isn't hidden from the world, so why would I want to come out into the world? Pan Hong said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. A look of admiration flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes as he secretly nodded. This junior didn't seem to be simple. He said, I can't be bothered with the matters of your Misty City, but if you want to use my Dongfang family to establish your might and think that we are easy to bully, then you are gravely mistaken. I will remember senior's teachings. When I return, I will definitely pass on this message to my masters so that they can understand senior's intentions, Pan Hong said. Impudent. How dare you? The young experts of the Dongfang family couldn't help but berate Pan Hong's rudeness. Pan Hong's words actually contained a hint of threat, which made the Dongfang family furious. The middle-aged man smiled and said disapprovingly, the disciples of Misty City are indeed extraordinary. If the disciples of Misty City were all like you, it wouldn't be impossible for Misty City to become the overlord of the Central Plain. The middle-aged man's words carried a deeper meaning. Pan Hong and the disciples of Misty City couldn't help but change their expressions. They knew that the middle-aged man was clearly praising them, but he was actually saying it for the surrounding cultivators to hear. Overlord of the Central Plains? Don't even think about it. For thousands of years, who knew how many amazing characters had appeared in the cultivation world, but no one had ever been able to unify the cultivation world. Wouldn't the middle-aged man's words push Misty City to the top of the storm and become the target of public criticism? Although Misty City was powerful and ambitious, it didn't dare to openly challenge the entire cultivation world. Senior, we will take our leave. I hope that we can spar with the experts of the Dongfang family in the future. Pan Hong knew that he wouldn't be able to obtain any benefits today, so he wanted to leave. A wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. This ancestor-level old monster could probably squash them to death with a single finger, and it wouldn't be any more than they were dead. Very well, you are welcome to spar, but I hope that something like today won't happen again, the middle-aged man said indifferently. He seemed to have some misgivings and didn't want to make things difficult for the disciples of Misty City. Pan Hong quickly left with his junior brothers. They didn't seem to want to stay in Beiling City any longer, so they headed straight for the city gate. The surrounding cultivators quickly made way for them. The middle-aged man also turned around and walked into the inn. The commotion disappeared just like that. The surrounding cultivators gradually dispersed. I didn't think that such a terrifying expert would come from the Dongfang family. I'm afraid the northern lands are about to fall into chaos. An old cultivator in the tea shop sighed. Ji Yufei wasn't the only one in the tea shop opposite the inn. Several cultivators were also chatting in the tea shop, talking about what had just happened in low voices. Old Shu, don't say any more. An expert of that level isn't someone we can talk about. Be careful that the people of the Dongfang family hear us and cause trouble, a middle-aged cultivator opposite the old man whispered. That's true. The old cultivator called Old Shu nodded and didn't say another word. Ji Yufei realized that the cultivation of these two cultivators wasn't high. They hadn't even broken through the awakening self stage. The path of cultivation was like 10,000 people crossing a single log bridge. Those who could achieve anything were few and far between, especially those who were rogue cultivators. This was especially true for some rogue cultivators. They didn't have a good way to cultivate, nor did they have a source of cultivation that they could use. Those who could become successful were few and far between. Judging from the clothes of these two cultivators, they should be rogue cultivators. Ji Yufei paid for the tea and walked out of the tea shop. He had changed his appearance and wasn't afraid that Dongfang Chen would recognize him. At this time, Dongfang Chen's figure had already disappeared from the inn. Today, Ji Yufei had gained a lot. He knew that an old monster of the ancestor level had come to the Dongfang family. This kind of peerless expert was very terrifying. Things seemed to have to be replanned. After all, there was an old monster in the inn. He was afraid that the moment he entered the inn, he would be discovered by this peerless expert. In front of this kind of peerless expert, he only had one choice, and that was, to escape. If he couldn't escape, there was only one outcome, and that was, death. Chapter 346. The people of Floating City had left through the South City Gate. Ji Yufei did not have to expend much effort to discover Pan Hong and the others' whereabouts. He carefully followed behind them. The South Road was the way out of the northern lands and into the Central Plains. For Pan Hong and his 3 junior brothers to leave Northern Mountain City at this time seemed a little strange. Ji Yufei followed behind Pan Hong and the others. He was waiting for an opportunity. He wanted to establish a powerful enemy for the Dongfang family. Misty City was undoubtedly a very good choice, because the conflict that happened in front of the inn today was witnessed by everyone. If the people of Floating City were to be attacked at this time, everyone would naturally think of the Dongfang family. It would be best if the people of Floating City were to clash directly with the Dongfang family. That way, he could take advantage of the chaos between the two families and reap the benefits. Very soon, Ji Yufei realized that Pan Hong and the others were not planning to leave the northern lands. Instead, they seemed to have left the city to welcome someone. They had arrived at a small town less than 20 kilometers away from Northern Mountain City and had checked into an inn in the town. Pan Hong and the others' every move was under Ji Yufei's surveillance. When Ji Yufei saw Pan Hong and his 3 junior brothers enter the inn, he began to wander around the vicinity of the inn. He observed the surrounding terrain and tried to sense if there were any powerful cultivators in the inn. Once he was certain that there were no powerful cultivators from Floating City in the inn, Ji Yufei walked out of the small town. He found a spot in the nearby snowy forest that was away from the wind and sat down cross-legged. He was recuperating his spirit as he waited for the arrival of night. Time trickled by and the surroundings were silent. Only the occasional sound of human voices and other noises could be heard from the small town in the distance. Ji Yufei sat cross-legged behind a large rock in the snowy forest. He was as still as a stone statue and no longer showed any signs of life. Several hours passed and the sun gradually set in the west. Just as the last ray of sunlight disappeared beneath the horizon, Jiyu Fei opened his eyes. Gently shaking off the snowflakes on his body, he silently stood up from behind the boulder. Jiyu Fei's eyes were like cold stars, exceptionally bright in the gloomy snow forest. "It's time to meet those fellows from Floating City," Jiyu Fei muttered to himself, before looking up at the sky and striding out of the forest. This small town was not far from Northern Mountain City, and it was also the only way to leave the northern lands and head to the Central Plains. Hence, even though it was already night time, it was still bustling with activity, and the streets were still filled with people. The figure of the cultivator riding the strange beast appeared above the town. There were only 2 decent-sized inns in the town. Because of the recent events in the northern lands, cultivators from all over the world had flocked to the northern lands. The 2 inns in the town were now overcrowded. Jiyu Fei entered the inn where Pan Hong and the others were staying, then sat down in a corner and ordered a few dishes. He was in no hurry to attack Pan Hong and the others. When others saw Jiyu Fei's appearance, they knew that he was a cultivator. Hence, even though he had taken a table by himself, no one dared to sit with him. Moreover, he did not hide his identity as a cultivator. With the ancient sword on his back, he only needed to release a slight wave of sword energy, and it was enough to intimidate ordinary cultivators. With Jiyu Fei's cultivation base at the 4th sky of the Ascended Realm, he could clearly sense the aura of Pan Hong and the others upstairs. Cultivators and mortals belonged to 2 different worlds. Cultivators usually kept a low profile, unwilling to have too much contact with mortals. They would not easily reveal themselves in front of mortals. Jiyu Fei sensed that Pan Hong and the others were eating in the private room upstairs. Jiyu Fei's cultivation base was higher than Pan Hong and the others, so Pan Hong and the others had no idea that they were being watched. Jiyu Fei's meal lasted for half an hour. After he was full, he paid the bill and went upstairs. On the 2nd floor, he went straight to the private room where Pan Hong and the others were. "That friend is here to visit. Why don't you come in for a while?" Just as Jiyu Fei arrived at the door, Pan Hong's voice was heard from the private room. Jiyu Fei did not reply. He sneered and the powerful aura of the Ascended Realm suddenly exploded from his body. Peng! With a bang, the wooden door of the private room exploded, turning into thousands of wood shavings that shot into the private room. A few exclamations could be heard from the private room. A few figures quickly moved to avoid the shards of the wooden door. Jiyu Fei strode into the private room. "You're courting death." Pan Hong's voice rang out once again in the private room. A black light suddenly burst forth in the private room, and the thousands of broken wood shavings immediately disappeared without a trace, as if they were swallowed into the void. Not even a speck of dust fell. At the same time, the black light quickly condensed into a large black hand. It emitted a powerful wave and grabbed towards Jiyu Fei, who was striding into the private room. Jiyu Fei. Jiyu Fei moved his finger like a sword and pointed it forward. Kai. A dazzling 5-colored sword radiance shot out and pierced forward. The chilling sword aura immediately filled every inch of the void in the private room. If one looked closely, they could see that the 5-colored sword radiance was surrounded by hair-thin lightning. The 5-elemental sword aura carried a trace of the power of lightning. Without any suspense, although the large black hand seemed to have the ability to swallow everything, it could not swallow Jiyu Fei's 5-elemental sword aura. The sword aura directly pierced through the large hand and stabbed towards Pan Hong's chest. Damn it! Pan Hong was shocked and quickly retreated. Bang! He directly smashed through the wall behind him and fell out of the private room. This sudden turn of events happened in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. Only when Pan Hong broke through the wall and fell out of the private room did the other 3 Misty City disciples react. Clang! A golden saber shadow flew out from one of them and slashed towards Jiyu Fei. Suddenly, a golden rainbow swept across the sky and split the sky. The entire private room was covered in a layer of golden light. A powerful and incomparably sharp saber chi spread out in all directions. It's just a small trick. Jiyu Fei sneered. He was unparalleled. In the face of the sharp saber light, he not only did not dodge, but also took a step forward and directly met it with a punch. Ji Yufei's fist collided with the dazzling saber light like a golden rainbow. There was a metallic clang, and the golden saber shadow was shaken away. Swoosh! At this moment, a dark green whip shadow, like a dragon coming out of the sea, wrapped around Ji Yufei's waist. A stone seal that emitted a grey light also smashed towards Ji Yufei's head. The people of Floating Mist City had good cultivation, and their reactions were even more agile. The two of them joined forces and actually sealed off all of Ji Yufei's escape routes. Good. Ji Yufei growled. He stretched out his right hand and grabbed the dark green whip shadow. At the same time, he punched upwards with his left hand. Bang! His fist fiercely hit the stone seal that was smashing down. Boom! With a loud bang, the stone seal was sent flying by Ji Yufei's punch. It directly smashed through the top of the private room and flew out. "I'll break your arm," the young man who had wrapped the dark green whip around Ji Yufei's right hand shouted. He suddenly pulled with force, wanting to tear off Ji Yufei's right arm. Unfortunately, Ji Yufei's body was extremely tough. It had been tempered by him to the point that it was comparable to a cultivator's magic treasure. Even if a divine weapon slashed his body, it would not be able to hurt him at all. Ji Yufei was like a huge mountain. Under the pull of that cultivator, not to mention Ji Yufei's arm, even Ji Yufei's body could not be moved at all. The young cultivator couldn't help but be shocked. The long whip in his hand was a powerful magic treasure. As long as it was wrapped around something, he only needed to pull and pull to break it in two. The entire whip was like a sharp blade. "Shameless boasting," Ji Yufei shouted. He pulled with his right hand and directly pulled the cultivator over. Then, he punched the cultivator in the chest and sent him flying. "Who are you?" At this time, Pan Hong, who had been forced through the wall by Ji Yufei, had already jumped in from the outside. He just happened to see Ji Yufei beating up his 3 junior brothers. "Weren't you very awe-inspiring during the day?" Ji Yufei said coldly as he looked at Pan Hong. You're from the Dongfang clan?" Pan Hong was startled. When did the Dongfang clan have such a powerful young expert? Weren't the people he saw during the day the elites of the Dongfang clan? Pan Hong's thoughts rapidly changed and his expression changed several times. The powerful aura exuding from his opponent caused him to feel a great pressure. "If you have the guts, then come with me." As Ji Yufei spoke, he directly rushed out of the roof that had been smashed by the stone seal, and then headed towards the snowy forest outside the small town. At this time, their fight had already alarmed the people in the inn. The noise they made was too loud. Not only did they break through the wall, but even the roof of the private room was broken. All the cultivators in the town sensed the energy fluctuations and headed towards the inn. "Preposterous. I want to see just what kind of divine being you are." Pan Hong was infuriated, and he too leapt out. In just a few short exchanges, his 3 junior brothers had been defeated, and this made him furious. The other 3 young cultivators also put away their magic treasures and chased after them. Among the 3, only the young cultivator who used the whip was punched by Ji Yufei and suffered internal injuries. The other 2 cultivators used magic treasures to attack Ji Yufei, so they weren't injured. As for the other cultivators, other than a few who were at the transcending mortality stage and above, none of them were willing to follow because they didn't have the ability to protect themselves. If they were to be caught in the crossfire, they would be out of luck. After everyone left, the inn owner saw that his inn was almost destroyed by those people. He wanted to cry but no tears came out. Boom! With a loud sound, the entire snowy forest shook. Ji Yufei and Pan Hong moved quickly in the snowy forest and fought fiercely. Large areas of the snowy forest collapsed and the snow on the ground was swept up into the sky. It had to be said that Pan Hong was very strong. Among the young cultivators, he was definitely one of the best. However, it was a pity that he met Ji Yufei. The battle didn't last long. Pan Hong's spells and divine abilities were broken one after another, and he was completely suppressed by Ji Yufei. His 3 junior brothers hurriedly went forward to fight with Pan Hong against Ji Yufei. The green whip shadow soared into the sky, as if it had turned into a green dragon, it crazily attacked Ji Yufei. The golden saber chi traversed hundreds of feet, constantly slashing towards Ji Yufei. A huge stone seal the size of a small mountain emitted a misty grey brilliance, bombarding towards Ji Yufei. Chapter 347. Bam! Ji Yufei sent the mountain-sized stone seal flying with a punch and pointed with his finger. Kai. Then, he swept away the green whip with a whip kick and sent the golden divine saber flying. He displayed great combat strength that made people's hearts palpitate. Master of the Void, I am supreme. Destroy. 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 Pan Hong bellowed. A vast amount of energy surged out from his body. 2 balls of chilling black light erupted from his hands, as though 2 black holes had appeared in his hands. 2 balls of black light instantly spread out and shrouded Ji Yufei. The terrifying fluctuation of the void seemed to be able to annihilate everything in its path. Snow and trees, as long as they were shrouded by the 2 balls of black light, disappeared in an instant as if they had vanished into thin air. Not even a speck of dust was left behind. Sword breaks all things. Kill. 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 Ji Yufei was like a reincarnated god of war. His long hair danced wildly. As he shouted, a 10-meter-long 5-colored sword radiance burst out of his hands. Like 2 5-colored rainbows, they pierced through the 2 balls of black light. Rumble. The earth trembled and the trees fell. 2 rays of dreadful sword chi instantly pierced into the 2 masses of black light that were spreading out. The other 3 ethereal city cultivators hurriedly dodged to the side. No one knew better than them how terrifying their senior brother's magical powers were. If they were shrouded by the black light, they would be annihilated in the void in an instant. Not even a speck of their remains would be left. What Pan Hong cultivated was a forbidden magical ability of floating city, a black demonic light that could obliterate everything. Even the magical treasures of martial cultivators would be obliterated. Unfortunately, Ji Yufei's 5-elemental sword chi was almost tangible and carried a trace of the power of thunder and lightning. The power of thunder and lightning could intimidate all things and was difficult to destroy. Even though it shot into the black light curtain, it was not destroyed. The 2 forces collided violently. The terrifying light curtain formed by the 2 balls of black light shook violently and was actually shaken. The pitch-black light was like the light of death from hell, but it could not destroy the power of the 5 elements. Ji Yufei's 5-elemental sword chi blocked the light curtain of death that enveloped him. Boom! With a loud bang, the void violently trembled. Then, ripples visible to the naked eye spread out as the 2 black light curtains that had enveloped the void exploded. Terrifying energy fluctuations swept out in all directions. The earth violently undulated like waves. Large swathes of trees fanned outwards. The accumulated snow on the ground was swept up high into the sky. The 3 young cultivators who had already escaped were also inevitably affected, and they cried out in alarm as they fled even further away. Roar! Pan Hong roared angrily as he flew backward. 2 5-colored sword rainbows with traces of thunder and lightning power pierced through the power of his forbidden divine ability and chased after him like 2 bolts of lightning. Pu! Pu! With 2 soft sounds, the 2 5-colored sword rainbows instantly pierced through Pan Hong's shoulders. Blood splattered everywhere. In the air, it was impossible for him to dodge. Senior brother. When the 3 young experts from Ethereal City saw this, they couldn't help but be shocked. One of them hurriedly leaped forward and caught Pan Hong, who was falling from the sky. The other 2 young cultivators controlled the golden divine saber and stone seal to slash at Ji Yufei, who was chasing after them. Weren't you very arrogant during the day? Why aren't you arrogant now? Ji Yufei sneered. Facing the fierce attacks of the 2 young experts, his expression remained unchanged as he strode forward. Bam! The stone seal that was surrounded by grey light was punched away by Ji Yufei. With a point of his finger, the golden saber chi that spanned hundreds of meters immediately collapsed in the air, turning into specks of golden light and dissipating in the void. Ji Yufei was unparalleled and displayed his unparalleled combat strength. With every step he took, the earth shook. Bam! Bam! The 2 young cultivators who attacked Ji Yufei coughed out blood and flew backward. Their golden divine sabers dimmed and one of the stone seals returned to its original form, its light fading away. Ethereal city. That's all there is to it. Ji Fei said disdainfully. He instantly arrived in front of Pan Hong and the cultivator who used the whip. Pan Hong was in an extremely sorry state. He no longer had the demeanor of a young expert who looked down on everyone during the day. Both of his shoulder joints were pierced, and his hands hung limply by his side. Blood flowed out of the wounds, and he had lost the ability to move his arms. Pan Hong stared at Ji Fei and said coldly, "I have to admit that you are very strong. However, in Ethereal City, my strength is only above average. There are many people stronger than me." "Is that so? Then call the experts of your sect to come find me. Of course, the result will not change. They will all be defeated by me," Ji Fei said coldly. "I'll fight you to the death." The young cultivator who was supporting Pan Hong let go of him and fiercely swung the whip in his hand. The whip immediately turned into a dark green dragon and swooped towards Ji Fei. "A little spark dares to compete with the bright moon?" Ji Fei chuckled disdainfully and pressed his right hand forward. A dazzling golden aura immediately surged out of his palm and rushed forward. With a casual palm, he attracted the power of metal in all directions and shook the heaven and earth. The golden aura surged like a golden wave. The dark green dragon was instantly annihilated in the golden wave of energy. Pan Hong and the young cultivator were directly sent flying 200 to 300 feet away and vomited blood. "All of you remember that my Dongfang clan isn't one to be bullied." Ji Fei left behind an afterimage on the spot after he spoke these words, and then he vanished on the spot. Damn it! The Dongfang family. After a long while, Pan Hong and the junior brother who had been sent flying by Ji Fei supported each other and stood up from the ground. In the battle with Ji Fei, the 4 young cultivators of Floating City were all defeated by Ji Fei. Pan Hong's eyes were about to spit fire. To him, Ji Fei's contempt was even more infuriating than his defeat. The cultivators who had followed the trail from the small town and were watching the battle from nearby witnessed the battle. Soon, news of the battle began to spread. "Senior brother." After the other 2 young cultivators found the magic treasures that had been sent flying by Ji Fei, they gathered towards Pan Hong. Everyone could not help but feel a wave of dejection. Ji Fei's strength made them feel a sense of helplessness. "We are only the vanguard to scout ahead. When the experts of the sect arrive, the Dongfang family will pay the price for what happened tonight," Pan Hong said coldly. Ji Fei had achieved his goal. What he needed to do now was to wait and see how things would develop. Just as the old ancestor of the Dongfang family had predicted, the people of Floating City wanted to reappear in front of everyone as experts. But now, Ji Fei had taught them a harsh lesson. If the people of Floating City did not get back at him, people would say that they were afraid of the Dongfang family. For an ambitious sect that wanted to make a name for itself in the cultivation world, this was simply a blow to the head. If they did not do something, Floating City would lose all face. Ji Fei returned to Beiling City that night and found a small inn near the Yunlai Inn where the people of the Dongfang family were staying. The night passed uneventfully. Other than sitting cross-legged in the guest room and cultivating, Ji Fei paid close attention to the movements of the Dongfang family. Early in the morning, Ji Fei, who had changed his appearance, began to wander around. He had changed his appearance again and suppressed his cultivation to the 5th or 6th layer of the awakened heaven. He did not carry the ancient sword on his back, but left it in the guest room. To him, that ancient sword was dispensable. Last night, when he fought with Pan Hong, he did not draw it at all. He did not walk the path of a sword immortal. His sword was in his heart, his body, and the surging 5 elemental yuan qi all over his body. After being struck by lightning for more than 10 days in the Thunder Lake, Ji Fei's 5 elemental yuan qi had fused with a trace of the power of thunder and lightning. He felt that his strength seemed to have undergone some kind of change. However, it was only a feeling. He did not know why he had such a feeling. The disciples of the Dongfang family rarely went in and out of the inn, so Ji Fei did not see Dongfang Chen again. Time passed quickly, and it was dusk again. Ji Fei, who had changed his appearance again, sat in the tea shop opposite the Yunlai Inn in an ostentatious manner and sipped tea as if nothing had happened. Of course, although he looked like he was sipping tea, he was actually paying attention to the movements on the opposite street. Suddenly, he noticed a few cultivators coming from the direction of the city gate. The few cultivators headed straight for the guest cloud arrival inn. When Ji Yufei saw the appearance of these cultivators, he couldn't help but feel anger rising in his heart. Among the cultivators, he found a familiar figure. The burly middle-aged man who shot him with an evil bow shrouded in ghostly aura outside Beeling Pass and almost killed him, as well as the middle-aged man with a strand of silver hair on his forehead and a black saber on his back, were among them. These guys. Ji Yufei couldn't help but clench his teeth. These people were too despicable. They were a bunch of sanctimonious bastards. One must know that these people were from the older generation, but they disregarded their status and ganged up on a young cultivator like him. This was too much and could not be forgiven. Ji Yufei thought that with his cultivation at the fourth sky of the Ascended Realm, he should be able to fight against these people. However, he wouldn't act rashly, but if he did, he would kill them in one strike. He didn't feel any guilt killing these people because they wanted him dead, so they had to be prepared to be killed by him. He couldn't be lenient to his enemies. There was an old saying that was right. Being kind to your enemies was being cruel to yourself. Ji Yufei would never make such a low-level mistake. After watching those people enter the inn, Ji Yufei was still leisurely sipping his tea. A few batches of people from the Dongfang family came back one after another. Their expressions were very solemn, and they didn't talk much. They all walked into the inn in silence. It was a peaceful day, and nothing happened. The people from the floating city didn't come to the Dongfang family to punish them. Ji Yufei couldn't help but feel a little strange. Could it be that the experts from the floating city haven't reached the northern lands yet?